Certainly. Here's a deeply refined, concise, and polished version of your original text, approximately 20% shorter, while preserving all key details and meaning. Everyone, I understand you're watching this to help pass the time as you rest. Before we begin, I'd like to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is on your end. Also, please remember to reflect on what you've just heard. Now, let's dive into the story. In January of 2008, a notable legal case emerged in the United States involving Shannon Nagovski, a federal inmate housed at the high-security federal penitentiary in Beaumont, Texas. Nagovski faced charges related to the tragic death of fellow inmate Uther Plant. The incident took place within the prison walls, raising concerns about security measures and inmate safety. The altercation escalated rapidly when Nagovski reportedly initiated the violence by striking Plant, causing him to fall onto the concrete floor. Seizing the moment, Nagovski continued the assault by forcefully stomping on Plant's head and neck, actions that were later described in court as both intentional and malicious. The brutality of his attack resulted in Plant's death, ending a tragic confrontation. Legal proceedings that followed were intricate and closely scrutinized. Nagovski was charged with 2 counts of capital murder. The first accused him of premeditated murder, given his status as a federal prisoner serving a life sentence, violation of statutes 1718, U.S.C. sections 1118 and 1111. The second count also encompassed premeditated first-degree murder under similar federal statutes. Both charges demanded the prosecution prove that Nagovski's actions were deliberate, malicious, and planned. During the trial, evidence was introduced to demonstrate Nagovski's intent and the premeditated nature of his crime. Witnesses described aggressive behavior from Nagovski in the days leading up to the incident. Additionally, security footage from the prison cameras captured the events unfolding during the attack, providing visual confirmation. The defense challenged the narrative, suggesting that the altercation was impulsive rather than premeditated. However, the jury delved into the evidence and ultimately convicted Nagovski on both counts. This conviction led to a sentencing phase where the severity of punishment was considered, especially given the possibility of a life sentence or capital penalty. This case underscored the persistent issues surrounding inmate violence within the federal correctional system and the effectiveness of preventative measures. It also highlighted the complexities faced by prosecutors in such environments, particularly in applying federal laws, interpreting intent, and handling cases involving potential capital punishment. The outcome had broader implications, fueling ongoing discussions about safety, legal procedures, and the justice system's approach to serious crimes within federal detention facilities. Oh, let me know if you'd like further adjustments. Within the United States correctional system, concerns over justice and security remained at the forefront. The courtroom was filled with legal professionals, journalists, and observers, all eager to witness a highly publicized case. The prosecution carefully assembled its argument against Shannon Nagovski, presenting extensive evidence that indicated clear premeditation. They contended that Nagovski did not act impulsively, but had meticulously planned the violent killing of Uther Plant well in advance. Testimonies from correctional officers and fellow inmates painted a bleak picture of Nagovski's character, describing him as prone to violent outbursts and showing no remorse for his actions. Prosecutors branded him as a threat to society, citing his criminal history as evidence of his dangerous tendencies. Conversely, the defense sought to humanize Nagovski by portraying him as a product of a difficult environment. They argued that he had been hardened by a life of crime in a prison system that often fostered hostility rather than offering opportunities for rehabilitation. The defense insisted that the attack on Plant was not premeditated, but stemmed from a spontaneous outburst fueled by the tense atmosphere within a maximum security facility. They emphasized that prison life is inherently violent, with many inmates resorting to violence for survival. While acknowledging the horror of Nagovski's actions, the defense maintained that they did not constitute a calculated plan to commit murder. Nevertheless, the evidence presented by the prosecution was compelling, especially security footage from prison cameras. The grainy black and white video vividly captured Nagovski assaulting Plant, knocking him down and then ruthlessly stomping on his head and neck. The footage showed the brutality of the attack, with Nagovski continuing his assault even as Plant lay motionless, underscoring the deliberate nature of his actions. Witness testimony further strengthened the case. Several inmates reported that in the days before the incident, Nagovski had made remarks hinting at his intent to harm Plant. One recounted overhearing him boast about taking care of Plant soon, while another observed Nagovski watching Plant's movements in the yard, seemingly waiting for the right moment to strike. Correctional officers also provided insights into Nagovski's disciplinary record, describing him as an inmate quick to resort to violence during conflicts. A medical examiner's report confirmed the severity of the assault, solidifying the case against him and leaving little doubt about the criminal intent behind the act. The investigation revealed that Plant had suffered multiple skull fractures and significant brain trauma inflicted by intense blunt force. The force of the assault caused irreversible damage, making survival impossible. The medical examiner concluded that the injuries aligned precisely with repeated blows, specifically the kind delivered by being forcefully stomped upon. Prosecutors highlighted this evidence to underscore the cruelty of the act, emphasizing that such violence could only be carried out with a clear intent to cause deadly harm. As the trial progressed, the emotional strain on Plant's family became increasingly apparent. His mother and sister attended every courtroom session, their grief starkly evident during the proceedings. During victim impact statements, his mother addressed the court, her voice trembling as she recounted the pain of losing her son to such a brutal act. She acknowledged that Plant had made mistakes, but was attempting to improve his life prior to his untimely death. Her heartfelt words served as a poignant reminder that this case was about more than legal technicalities. It was a tragedy of lost human life. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. When the foreman announced Nagovski's guilt on both charges of capital murder, a collective sense of relief swept through the prosecution and Plant's family. Nonetheless, the trial was far from over, as the subsequent phase focused on sentencing. Given the severity of his crimes, prosecutors argued for the death penalty, asserting that Nagovski remained a danger to society and that such punishment was justified. Conversely, the defense urged the jury to consider a life sentence without parole, emphasizing that executing him would not undo the harm and might perpetuate further violence. During the sentencing phase, evidence of Nagovski's past violence surfaced. The prosecution detailed previous assaults on fellow inmates and correctional staff, arguing that he had demonstrated a persistent inability to rehabilitate. They contended that even behind bars, he posed a threat to others. The defense presented psychological evaluations indicating long-standing untreated mental health issues, suggesting that he should be given a chance for rehabilitation instead of execution. Throughout this stage, public opinion remained divided. Some believed Nagovski epitomized evil, deserving the harshest legal consequences, while others felt that the justice system itself had failed Plant and had fostered an environment of violence that led to this tragedy. Media coverage closely followed the case, analyzing the legal and moral implications of the upcoming sentencing. Throughout the proceedings, Nagovski remained mostly silent, showing little emotion even as his fate was decided. As the final arguments concluded, the courtroom hushed in anticipation of the jury's decision, one that would determine whether he would spend the rest of his life behind bars or face execution by a carefully administered method. The weight of the case pressed heavily on everyone present, and those in the courtroom prepared for the conclusion of a trial that had already left a profound impact on all witnesses. When the jury returned, their faces were solemn and unreadable, reflecting the gravity of the moment. Their deliberate steps betrayed the importance of their verdict, and some members avoided direct gaze with the defendant, Shannon Nagovski. The presiding judge called the court to order and invited the jury foreman to announce the sentencing. Every eye fixed on him, tense with expectation, as he unfolded the verdict. We, the jury, find that the defendant, Shannon Nagovski, shall be sentenced to death by lethal injection. A collective breath of relief swept through parts of the courtroom, while others, particularly the victim's family, reacted emotionally, some gasping and tears streaming down their faces. The prosecution appeared composed, their expressions mingling relief with weariness. Conversely, Nagovski displayed no visible reaction. He maintained a blank stare, seemingly unaffected by the pronouncement, as if the verdict was preordained from the start. The judge acknowledged the jury's decision, but emphasized that imposing the death penalty was never undertaken lightly. He explained that the brutality of the crime, combined with Nagovski's prior record, left no room for mercy. Detailing the unprovoked assault, the savage nature of the act, and the extensive premeditation, the judge formally sentenced Nagovski, who was ordered to be transferred to death row at the federal penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. As the gavel struck and the trial drew to a close, the tension finally broke. The victim's mother wept uncontrollably, overwhelmed by grief and a sense of justice served. Outside the courtroom, press members hurried to share the news, cameras capturing Nagovski being led away in shackles by U.S. Marshals. His expression remained stoic. If any remorse or fear existed, he showed no signs of it. News outlets broadcast the verdict live, with legal analysts debating its implications. Some argued that executing Nagovski might deter future acts of violence within prisons, while others questioned whether such measures address the deeper problems within the justice system. Civil rights organizations have long criticized the use of capital punishment, considering it an obsolete and flawed means of delivering justice. Conversely, supporters of law enforcement often praise such sentences as necessary for ensuring societal safety. Following the verdict, the case remained a central topic in national debates about the ethics and efficacy of the death penalty, prompting widespread discussion. Investigative journalism delved into the background of Nagovski, revealing a pattern of increasing aggression that predated his incarceration. Former inmates and correctional staff described him as a figure who thrived on intimidation and cruelty, with some claiming he previously expressed a desire to harm again, regardless of potential repercussions. Others argued that systemic failures early in his life steered him toward violence as his primary mode of communication. Meanwhile, the legal process moved forward as is customary in such cases. Nagovski's defense team promptly filed an appeal, raising concerns over procedural errors during the trial. They contended that the jury might have been unduly influenced by emotional testimonies rather than factual evidence, and pointed out that the prison system's inaction in inmate disputes had contributed to the circumstances leading to Plant's death. Legal experts, however, believed the chances of the appeal succeeding were slim, given the strength of the evidence and the careful nature of jury deliberations. While the legal proceedings unfolded, Nagovski was transferred to death row, where he was placed in solitary confinement. There, he spent nearly all his time in a small cell, experiencing limited human contact. Reports suggested that he remained largely unperturbed by his circumstances, maintaining a composed and stoic demeanor that had previously unsettled courtroom observers. Other inmates awaiting similar sentences tended to avoid him, sensing the unpredictability that had marked his prior behavior and made him seem dangerous. For Uther Plant's family, the verdict was one step toward closure, yet not a source of peace. His mother, in a tearful interview, expressed profound grief, admitting, "I don't know if I believe in the death penalty. All I know is that my son is gone and nothing can bring him back." She mourned that Plant had spent his final moments in terror, with no one there to assist him. Despite Nagovski's fate, her grief remained heavy, carrying the weight of her loss for years. The delays in Nagovski's execution due to the ongoing appeals persisted for many years. Finally, in late 2020, after all legal options were exhausted, he was scheduled for execution. As the date approached, media attention reignited, with advocates debating both for and against capital punishment. Some highlighted that Nagovski's lack of remorse and his own comments about feeling nothing for his actions underscored the complex moral questions surrounding such sentences. Uther Nagovski's execution demonstrated how capital punishment often perpetuates a cycle of violence. On his final day, he declined a meal and chose silence rather than offering a last statement. Witnesses, including his family, observed from behind glass as the lethal injection was administered. Within minutes, he was pronounced dead. There was no outcry or dramatic farewell, only quiet resignation as the reality settled in. For some, justice felt served. For others, it was a somber reminder of a flawed system. Yet, for Nagovski's loved ones, the loss was final. No verdict or punishment could truly bring him back or alter their grief. In a different case from Australia, January 2008 marked a notable turning point in the long-standing saga of the Perth Mint swindle, an incident originating in the early 1980s. This case gained renewed attention when the Western Australian government extended ex gratia payments to the Mickelberg brothers, who had long maintained their innocence. The theft, which took place in 1982, involved the brothers Ray, Peter, and Brian, who were accused and convicted of stealing gold bullion valued at approximately $653,000 from the Perth Mint. The prosecution claimed the brothers had devised an intricate scheme using false paperwork and a fake transaction to commit the crime. The case drew significant media attention due to its audacity, combined with the ongoing legal battles over the years. The Mickelberg brothers maintained that they had been falsely accused, asserting police corruption had played a major role. Their claims gained credibility after revelations of misconduct, including allegations of fabricated evidence and coerced confessions. These factors fueled multiple appeals and legal challenges aimed at overturning their convictions. A major development occurred in July 2004 when the Western Australian Court of Criminal Appeal overturned the brothers' convictions. The court cited concerns regarding the integrity of the initial investigation and police misconduct, effectively exonerating the brothers after nearly 2 decades of imprisonment. While this decision restored their reputations, it did not immediately compensate them for the years lost or the damage done to their lives and families. The pursuit of justice persisted, and in December 2007, the police issued a public apology to the Mickelbergs. This gesture acknowledged the wrongful convictions and was a meaningful step toward reconciliation. Building on this acknowledgement, in January 2008, State Attorney General Jim McInerney offered ex gratia payments of $500,000 to each surviving brother, Ray and Peter, as recognition of the injustices they endured. The compensation offered to the Mickelberg brothers aimed to provide some form of redress for the years of legal struggles and personal hardships they had faced. This followed previous payments totaling $68,690, which had been made to help cover legal expenses during their appeals. The brothers accepted these payments in good faith, viewing them as a way to bring closure to a chapter that had overshadowed their lives for countless years. However, this financial settlement did not fully satisfy everyone involved. Their lawyer had initially sought $950,000 for Ray and $750,000 for Peter, believing these amounts better reflected the severe difficulties they had endured. Despite this, agreeing to the payments marked an important milestone in resolving the case. The Perth Mint swindle and its fallout had profound implications for Australia's legal system. It exposed serious issues such as misconduct within police forces, the system's fallibility, and the struggle individuals encounter when trying to overturn wrongful convictions. The case also emphasized the significance of accountability and transparency in law enforcement agencies. For the Mickelberg brothers, the events of January 2008 represented a bittersweet victory. Though they finally received official acknowledgement of injustices done to them, along with some compensation, the emotional and psychological scars of their ordeal persisted. Their case served as a stark reminder of how miscarriages of justice can occur and the ongoing need for vigilance in safeguarding truth within the legal framework. The ex gratia payments granted in January 2008 reignited public interest in one of Australia's most notorious legal battles. While the government's decision to compensate them was seen as an acknowledgement of error, it could not undo the decades of suffering they had endured. These payments also prompted broader questions about the justice system's handling of wrongful convictions and whether monetary compensation can truly repair the irreversible damage inflicted on those wrongly accused. For Ray and Peter Mickelberg, the battle for justice had largely defined their lives. Their ordeal began in 1982 when they were arrested and charged with defrauding the Perth Mint of more than $650,000 worth of gold bullion. The case rested heavily on the testimony of Detective Don Hancock, a senior officer from Western Australia Police, who claimed that the brothers had confessed during an interrogation. Yet, the Mickelbergs consistently insisted they were innocent, asserting that the so-called confession was fabricated and that they had been set up by corrupt police officials. Despite their protests, they were convicted in 1983, Ray receiving a 20-year sentence and Peter 16. Their younger brother Brian was also convicted, but later had his conviction overturned on appeal. From the outset, the case was shrouded in controversy, with allegations of misconduct and procedural flaws casting doubt on the validity of the convictions. During interrogations, the brothers alleged that police officers had physically assaulted them, with Ray later describing in vivid detail how he was beaten and mistreated while in custody. These claims of police misconduct, however, were dismissed at the time, and their assertions of innocence went unheard as they remained imprisoned. Despite their incarceration, the Mickelbergs continued to fight tirelessly to clear their names, submitting repeated appeals that were often denied. Years passed before new evidence cast doubt on their convictions, marking a turning point in the case. In the late 1990s, a former officer named Tony Lowski stepped forward with a startling confession. He revealed that he had helped falsify evidence against the brothers under the orders of Don Hancock. This revelation severely undermined the credibility of the original case and exposed widespread corruption within the Western Australian police force. Lowski's testimony painted a troubling picture of how evidence had been planted and statements manipulated to secure wrongful convictions. As public concern intensified, the Western Australian Court of Criminal Appeal finally overturned the brothers' convictions in 2004, recognizing that a miscarriage of justice had occurred. Although their convictions were set aside, Ray had spent over a decade behind bars before being released on parole in 1993, while Peter served nearly 8 years, gaining freedom in 1991. Both struggled to reintegrate into society, their reputations forever damaged by the long-standing allegations. The stigma of being branded as wrongdoers persisted, and rebuilding their lives proved challenging. By January of 2008, the state finally offered compensation to the brothers after more than 2 decades of legal battle. The payments aimed to provide some restitution, but many believed they fell short of what was justified. Their lawyer had initially argued for a larger settlement, citing the financial and emotional toll of their wrongful imprisonment. Ultimately, the brothers accepted the offered $500,000 each, eager to move forward and put the ordeal behind them. While the compensation provided some relief, it did little to address deeper issues within the justice system. A public apology was issued by the police in 2007, yet no officers faced accountability for their roles in the wrongful convictions. Notably, Don Hancock, the main detective involved, had already been killed, and no disciplinary actions were taken against others involved. The 2001 car bombing, believed to be retaliatory for unrelated criminal dealings involving Hancock, resulted in multiple fatalities, yet many questions surrounding the case remained unanswered for the wider Australian community. The Mickelberg case became a powerful warning about the dangers of unchecked police authority and the risk of miscarriages of justice. It revealed significant flaws within the legal system and raised doubts about how easily innocent people could be convicted based on fabricated evidence. This case also sparked debates over the adequacy of the appeals process and whether stronger safeguards were necessary to prevent future wrongful convictions. Even years after their exoneration, the Mickelbergs refused to remain silent. They actively called for systemic reform, condemning police corruption and advocating for greater transparency within the justice system. Ray Mickelberg, in particular, dedicated himself to highlighting cases of wrongful conviction, using his experience to shed light on systemic failures and push for reforms designed to protect others from suffering similar injustices. Despite their eventual vindication, the scars of their ordeal never fully healed. The years of wrongful imprisonment had devastating effects not only on the brothers but also on their families. Their relationships endured strain, careers were disrupted, and the psychological toll left a lasting mark. No amount of compensation could undo the damage inflicted, Even with legal exoneration, they remained emblematic of one of Australia's most infamous legal scandals. The Mickelberg case serves as a stark reminder that justice is not always swift or equitable. It took more than 25 years for the truth to emerge, yet complete accountability was never fully achieved. The ex gratia payments made in January of 2008 appeared to be the government's attempt to settle the matter, but for the Mickelbergs, the fight for fairness had exacted a far greater price than monetary compensation could offer. The resolution marked the conclusion of a lengthy legal struggle, but it could not erase the profound impact of their wrongful convictions. Years lost behind bars, damaged reputations, and a justice system that failed them repeatedly remained their bitter legacy. Following their release, the brothers faced ongoing challenges in trying to rebuild their lives. Ray Mickelberg, the eldest, had been a prosperous businessman and a veteran of the Vietnam War, with a bright future before his arrest. The ordeal changed him profoundly. The psychological wounds from wrongful imprisonment and abusive encounters with corrupt police officers left deep, lasting scars. The pain of those years continued to influence his life long after his release, serving as a reminder of the profound flaws within the system that once condemned him unjustly. After being released on parole in 1993, Ray Mickelberg's life was overshadowed by the stigma linked to the Perth Mint swindle. Employers hesitated to offer him work, and for many years the public continued to see him as guilty, despite growing doubts about his conviction. Similarly, Peter Melberg, released from prison in 1991, endured profound hardships. The years behind bars had taken a heavy toll on him as well. Their lives were forever altered. They lost their reputations, strained personal relationships, and the chance to lead ordinary lives. Even after being cleared, persistent doubts persisted among some, as the shadow of their wrongful convictions cast a pall over them, constantly reminding them of the struggle to prove their innocence. A particularly frustrating aspect of the case was that no police officers within Western Australia were ever held accountable for the misconduct. Although the police publicly issued apologies in 2007 and the state provided financial compensation a year later, the officers responsible for fabricating evidence and coercing confessions faced no legal consequences. The central figure in these misconducts, Detective Don Hancock, was killed in a car bombing in 2001, reportedly in retaliation related to organized crime. With his death, many questions about the case remained unanswered, such as whether others were involved in framing the Mickelbergs, or how deep the corruption within the police truly ran. The genuine masterminds behind the 1982 theft continue to be unknown, as the gold valued at approximately $653,000 was never recovered. Over time, various theories emerged. Some suggested it was an inside job by individuals with direct access to the Perth Mint's operations, while others believed organized crime syndicates might have been involved. However, with the Mickelbergs wrongly convicted and decades having passed, the chances of identifying the real culprits have faded. The case not only raised questions about the specific crime, but also highlighted broader issues within the justice system. Their wrongful convictions underscored systemic flaws, suggesting that many others might be imprisoned for crimes they did not commit, especially given the lengthy process to exonerate them. Revelations about police misconduct and fabrications prompted calls for improved oversight, yet meaningful reforms moved slowly. Ray Mickelberg became an outspoken critic of the justice system, frequently sharing accounts of the abuse he had endured and criticizing the flawed police investigation that led to his conviction. He openly discussed the physical assaults he faced at the hands of officers and the broader failures that allowed such injustice to occur, shining a light on the urgent need for systemic change. The story of the Mickelbergs exposes the profound psychological toll of wrongful imprisonment and the ongoing struggle to rebuild the life after release. Their ordeal resonated deeply with many, especially those who had faced or feared similar miscarriages of justice. They became vocal advocates, using their experience to shed light on the risks of unchecked police authority. Peter Mickelberg, though less outspoken, shared his brother's unwavering drive to keep their case in public consciousness. Together, they worked tirelessly to draw attention to their injustices and to prevent others from suffering similar fates. Nevertheless, in 2008, the compensation awarded was widely seen as a symbolic gesture, an attempt by authorities to quietly close the case without tackling the systemic flaws it uncovered. The Mickelberg's case continued to generate discussion among legal experts and academics, who analyzed it as a stark example of wrongful conviction and debated the impact of police corruption on the justice system. The story's significance extended beyond the courtroom, inspiring numerous books and documentaries that secured its place in Australian legal history. Hollywood even dramatized the case in a 2012 film titled The Great Gold Swindle, depicting the infamous heist and subsequent trial. Yet no fictionalization could fully convey the pain and suffering the brothers endured. The settlement in January 2008 marked the conclusion of their legal struggle, but for the Mickelbergs, emotional scars persisted. Their experience remains a profoundly powerful reminder of how haste in judgment, corruption within law enforcement, and the struggles of overturning wrongful convictions can devastate lives. The Perth Mint swindle remains one of Australia's most notorious unresolved crimes, and the injustices suffered by the Mickelbergs continue to cast a shadow over the nation's legal history. Though they ultimately achieved justice, it came at a tremendous cost, an expense no monetary sum could ever compensate. Their story stands as a cautionary tale and a testament to resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity. Yet, a haunting question lingers. If the Mickelbergs did not commit the crime, then who was truly responsible? In a different case, in January 2008, Singaporean headlines were dominated by a high-profile legal proceeding involving a 20-year-old full-time national serviceman named Dave Teo Ming. He was a member of the Singapore Armed Forces and faced serious allegations after unlawfully leaving his military camp while armed. His actions sparked major concerns about national security and public safety. On September 5th of 2007, Teo was formally charged in the subordinate courts with unlawful firearm possession under the Arms Offences Act. His case garnered widespread attention as authorities sought to address the implications of his breach of security protocols. In 2007, Teo was reported missing from his cantonment with an assault rifle and several rounds of ammunition, prompting a nationwide investigation. His unauthorized disappearance was particularly concerning given Singapore's strict gun laws and the rarity of firearm-related incidents. A swift, intensive search ensued, and in the early hours of September 4th, 2007, authorities apprehended Teo at Orchard Road shopping mall. He was found in possession of the stolen weapon, providing relief to the public but also sparking intense scrutiny of security procedures and mental health support available within the military. Meanwhile, tensions rose in court as Ong faced multiple charges. He was accused of associating with Teo, knowing that Teo carried a firearm, and was later charged with illegal possession of ammunition and threatening his ex-girlfriend with a knife in an unrelated case. Initially offered a bail of 50,000 Singapore dollars, Ang's family couldn't raise the amount promptly, leading him to voluntarily stay in detention. Conversely, Teo was denied bail due to concerns about public safety and potential interference with witnesses. In October 2007, Teo's case was transferred to the High Court for future trial. During a preliminary hearing in late November, his legal team requested a reduction of charges, citing possible diminished responsibility, and were given time until late December to submit psychiatric evidence. By early January, Ong's lawyers also petitioned for charge reductions, and by February 14, 2008, the cases were scheduled separately, Ong in the subordinate courts and Teo in the High Court. In April 2008, Ong's defense announced his intention to plead guilty, with his lawyer aiming to secure the minimum sentence of 5 years imprisonment. Meanwhile, Teo was set for trial on July 7th of the same year, after the preliminary court found sufficient grounds to proceed against him. The proceedings marked a pivotal moment, highlighting issues of military discipline, mental health, and the responsibilities of national service. The cases continue to captivate public attention, emphasizing the importance of security measures and support systems within the nation's defense framework. The case of Dave Teo Ming highlights the profound impact such incidents have on national policies and societal perceptions of the pressures faced by young servicemen. His story serves as a stark reminder of the complexities surrounding military service and underscores the need for robust support systems for those in the armed forces. It emphasizes that while maintaining security protocols is crucial, attention must also be given to the personal and psychological challenges that service members may encounter. As legal proceedings progressed in early 2008, public discourse in Singapore intensified around Teo's case. The gravity of his violations, combined with widespread concerns over national safety, meant every update was met with intense scrutiny. Singapore's reputation for strict firearm regulations and low crime rates was challenged when it emerged that a full-time national service member had managed to smuggle a lethal weapon out of a military camp and carry it through the city. This incident raised serious questions not only about individual responsibility, but also about systemic oversight and security lapses. The military and government faced mounting pressure to address these concerns. An internal inquiry was initiated by the Singapore Armed Forces to investigate how Teo was able to bypass security checks and exit the camp with an assault rifle loaded with live ammunition. Although the full details were not made public, it was reported that the review led to stricter security measures and more vigilant monitoring of servicemen, especially those showing signs of emotional strain. Despite these steps, speculation persisted regarding Teo's mental state and motives. During court hearings, his lawyers presented evidence pointing to a troubled past, including a challenging childhood characterized by family instability and prior legal issues. Teen years had seen him involved in gang-related activities, resulting in juvenile detention. Military service was viewed as a chance for rehabilitation. However, the pressures of service appeared to have worsened his pre-existing struggles instead of alleviating them. A particularly shocking aspect revealed during the trial was Teo's claimed reason for taking the weapon. According to testimonies and police investigations, he had intended to confront and possibly harm his former girlfriend, who had recently ended their relationship. He had confided in a friend about feelings of betrayal and desperation, leading to speculation that his actions were driven more by emotional distress than premeditated malice. Nonetheless, prosecutors argued that regardless of his personal motives, his actions endangered numerous lives and demanded accountability. Further details emerged regarding the hours leading up to Teo's arrest after he left the camp on the evening of September 2nd, 2007. He had wandered through the city carrying a concealed assault rifle in the bag he had met up with earlier that day. Together, they discussed his plans and potential escape routes at a hotel. Surveillance footage later revealed both of them moving through various popular city areas, including Clarke Quay and Geelong, known for their vibrant nightlife. At one point, Teo was seen handling the weapon in a public restroom, raising concerns about how close Singapore had come to witnessing a tragic incident of violence. Law enforcement officials testified that Teo had checked into a budget hotel in the Orchard area the night before his arrest. This location was eventually pinpointed as the place where he was located, thanks to intelligence gathered from his known associates and CCTV footage. Early on September 4th, police raided his hotel room, catching Teo off guard. Reports indicated that he had initially reached for his weapon but ultimately surrendered without resisting. The rifle was recovered fully loaded, along with additional rounds of ammunition in his possession. Psychological evaluations played a significant role in shaping the court's understanding of Teo's case. Mental health professionals examined him for signs of severe depression or other disorders that could have impaired his judgment. While the defense argued for leniency by emphasizing mental health issues, the prosecution contended that Teo was fully aware of his actions and had deliberately evaded authorities, demonstrating his capacity for calculated decisions. Another individual, Ong, had been arrested for assisting Teo. Although he did not carry the weapon himself, his willingness to support Teo despite knowing he was armed was viewed as a serious offense. Ong's family appealed for mercy, claiming that he had merely become involved in the situation without the intention to commit a crime. His lawyer argued that despite making poor choices, Ong had never posed a direct risk to public safety. The court carefully considered these factors, but while Ong's legal team pushed for the minimal possible sentence, no guarantees of leniency existed. Public opinion on the case was deeply divided. Some viewed Teo as a troubled young man acting out of emotional distress, deserving a chance at rehabilitation. Others saw him as a reckless individual whose actions could have endangered many lives, insisting that he should face the full penalties of the law. Media coverage was intense, with analysts debating whether the national service system had failed Teo or if he was simply beyond help. Beyond immediate legal repercussions, the case sparked wider conversations about mental health support for national servicemen. Critics argued that the military's approach to mental health was overly rigid, focusing primarily on discipline and punishment rather than addressing emotional well-being. Many young servicemen face significant emotional challenges, often compounded by the stigma surrounding mental health issues within the military environment. Despite efforts to offer counseling and support services, some veterans have spoken out, revealing that seeking help was frequently discouraged or misunderstood, leaving many to endure their struggles in silence. Recognizing these shortcomings, the Ministry of Defense announced plans to implement additional measures aimed at safeguarding the mental well-being of personnel, especially those with a history of behavioral concerns. These included stricter oversight protocols to prevent unauthorized removal of weapons and ammunition from military facilities, with the intention of reducing future risks. However, while such precautions aimed to prevent incidents, they couldn't reverse the systemic failures exposed in Teo's case. As the trial unfolded, overwhelming evidence clearly demonstrated Teo's deliberate actions. Testimonies from witnesses, surveillance footage, and forensic reports all confirmed that he had knowingly taken a firearm, apparently with intentions that raised serious concerns. His remorse during the proceedings was apparent, yet whether this would influence the court's judgment remained uncertain. The prosecution pushed for a harsh sentence, underscoring the seriousness of his conduct and the fear it caused among the public. By late January 2008, the court was approaching a decisive moment, with the verdict imminent and the nation's attention focused on how justice would be served. Speculation centered on whether the court would consider Teo's troubled background and emotional state or use his case as a stern warning to uphold Singapore's strict laws on firearms. The decision would not only impact Teo's future, but also fuel broader debates concerning justice, rehabilitation, and national security in a country where such offenses are rarely seen. By early 28, courtrooms were filled with reporters, legal experts, and citizens eager to witness the outcome of a case that had dominated headlines for months. The proceedings had raised important questions about military security, mental health support for servicemen, and the integrity of Singapore's justice system. As both sides presented their closing arguments, the nation waited anxiously to see how the court would weigh the gravity of Teo's actions against his personal circumstances. The prosecution was resolute, emphasizing that Teo's intent was clear, noting he had stolen an automatic assault rifle along with over 20 rounds of live ammunition from his camp. His actions, they argued, posed a serious threat, especially given that he had managed to smuggle the weapon into civilian areas. Although he had not discharged the firearm, the fact that it was loaded and stolen with specific targets in mind justified a severe punishment. The legal framework in Singapore was designed to uphold strict control over firearms, and any breach was treated with utmost seriousness to maintain the safety and security of the community. Prosecution officials argued that a severe sentence was essential not only to hold Teo accountable, but also to send a firm warning that such violations would not be tolerated. They asserted that showing leniency in this case could set a dangerous example. Meanwhile, Teo's defense team made a final appeal, urging the court to consider his challenging background. They portrayed him as a young man who had grown up amid hardship, battling personal struggles and emotional stress. His experiences during military service, instead of providing discipline and stability, had worsened his difficulties. The rigid military environment, often discouraging open discussions about mental health, had left him feeling isolated and vulnerable. Teo's mother was present in the courtroom, her face marked by concern and grief. She had mostly remained silent during the proceedings, but those familiar with the family said she had pleaded with her son before his arrest to surrender voluntarily. The defense stressed that Teo was not a career criminal or a hardened offender, but a young individual in crisis, acting out of desperation rather than malice. While acknowledging his legal violations, they asked for compassion during sentencing, emphasizing that a lengthy prison stay would do little to facilitate his rehabilitation. Teo's co-accused and friend Ang Guan-jun had already expressed his intention to plead guilty. His sentencing was scheduled independently, and experts predicted he would likely face a minimum of 5 years of imprisonment, along with mandatory caning. Unlike Teo, Ang had not been the one wielding the firearm and played a more minor role, assisting Teo with his movements after leaving camp. While their actions were illegal, the court appeared to recognize Ang as a secondary participant in the incident. Throughout the trial, Teo maintained a mostly expressionless demeanor, but as the verdict neared, his composure broke as tears streaked his face while the judge prepared to announce the sentence. On sentencing day, the courtroom fell silent as the judge outlined the verdict. The judge acknowledged Teo's personal difficulties and emotional turmoil, but emphasized that the gravity of his actions could not be overlooked. He had not simply abandoned his post or acted impulsively. He had moved freely through the city with a military-grade weapon, ready to use it. The potential threat to public safety was undeniable, and the psychological impact on the community could not be dismissed. After careful consideration, the judge sentenced Teo to 9 years in prison and a mandatory 6 strokes of the cane. The sentence was stern but less than the maximum possible. While mental health and background were taken into account, the court ultimately believed that a strong deterrent was necessary to reinforce the seriousness of such offenses. The message sent was clear. In 28, Singapore's strict firearms laws left no room for negotiation, emphasizing their importance even in moments of personal distress. Attempting to justify or excuse violations of such regulations was futile, as the law prioritized national security above all. During the sentencing, Teo, who had been quietly observing the proceedings from the floor, appeared visibly unsettled but accepted his fate with a nod. His mother, seated at the back of the courtroom, quietly sobbed, overwhelmed by the circumstances. Ultimately, he received a sentence of 5 years in prison, consistent with expectations, along with the minimum number of caning strokes. His lesser role in the crime was acknowledged, yet he faced the inevitable repercussions of his actions. With the conclusion of this case, which had captivated Singapore for months, the legal proceedings ended, but the emotional scars persisted. In response, Singapore's armed forces promptly reviewed and tightened their security protocols, emphasizing stricter control of weapons and ammunition. Additional psychological support initiatives were launched for national servicemen, with military counselors encouraged to be more vigilant in detecting and assisting individuals exhibiting signs of stress or distress. The incident also ignited a broader conversation about the pressures faced during national service. Although many Singaporean men served without incident, Teo's case revealed vulnerabilities within the system, flaws that, if unaddressed, could trigger future challenges. Despite legal closure and reforms, emotional wounds lingered. For Teo, incarceration would become a chapter of self-reflection, a chance to confront the gravity of his choices. His family privately held hope that he would emerge from prison transformed, ready to rebuild and move forward. Over time, the nation continued to recover from the ordeal, but its lessons endured, the delicate balance between law and empathy, the military's duty to its personnel, and the importance of mental health awareness in high-stakes environments remain subjects of ongoing debate. Long after headlines faded, the story of a young man's desperate acts served as a poignant reminder that even in one of the safest countries in the world, moments of crisis could produce actions with enduring consequences. In January of 2008, the Netherlands made a notable stride in its ongoing fight against organized crime, especially in relation to the notorious Hells Angels motorcycle club. The closure of the famed Amsterdam establishment, Yab Yum, marked a significant breakthrough in efforts to dismantle criminal networks intertwined with legitimate enterprises. Established in the 1970s, Yab Yum had long symbolized Amsterdam's liberal stance towards the sex industry. It operated as a high-end gentlemen's club, attracting wealthy clients from around the globe. However, beneath its luxurious exterior, authorities alleged that the establishment was deeply embedded with the Hells Angels, serving as a cover for various illicit activities, and was more than just an upscale venue. Investigations into Yab Yum revealed connections to criminal operations, highlighting the ongoing challenge of infiltrating and dismantling organized crime within seemingly legitimate businesses. Investigations uncovered a tangled network of coercion and threats orchestrated by the Hells Angels, who systematically pressured the management of a local establishment. Over time, the motorcycle club used intimidation tactics, including blackmail and threats, to take control of the business. This takeover enabled them to leverage the venue for money laundering, drug distribution, and other illicit activities, effectively blending criminal schemes with legitimate business operations. Recognizing the seriousness of these accusations, the city authorities responded decisively. In December of 2007, Amsterdam City Council withdrew the operating permit of the establishment, citing concerns about infiltration by organized crime and risks of ongoing unlawful activity. The management challenged this decision, leading to a legal dispute, which in January of 2008 resulted in the court upholding the council's ruling and shutting down the venue. This event was more than the closure of a single business. It marked a firm stance by Dutch authorities against criminal influence within the local economy. The shutdown sent a strong message that even long-standing and influential institutions could not operate outside the law. In the wake of this closure, law enforcement intensified efforts to scrutinize other businesses suspected of harboring criminal groups. They carried out raids and investigations targeting establishments with alleged links to organized crime, reflecting the country's commitment to uphold the rule of law and safeguard its legitimate industries. The case also sparked public discussion about the challenges of regulating sectors vulnerable to criminal exploitation. Although the Netherlands has traditionally adopted a pragmatic attitude toward the legal sex industry, the incident revealed vulnerabilities within the regulatory framework. It became clear that a delicate balance was necessary, maintaining tolerance while implementing stringent oversight to prevent illegal infiltration. In subsequent years, Amsterdam introduced tighter regulations, including more thorough background checks for license applicants, enhanced financial transparency standards, and closer cooperation between law enforcement and oversight agencies. The incident exemplifies how organized crime can infiltrate and corrupt lawful enterprises, emphasizing the need for ongoing vigilance, adaptable regulations, and consistent enforcement. Today, the legacy of that case remains a stark reminder of the complexities involved in balancing progressive social policies with the imperative to protect society from criminal influence. The lessons learned from this case continue to shape strategies for preventing and countering organized crime in the Netherlands and beyond. The closure of Yam in January of the year 2008 was not an isolated event, but the result of years of investigation, legal actions, and behind-the-scenes struggles between authorities and criminal groups operating within the country. For many years, suspicions linked the Hells Angels to criminal activities, yet gathering concrete proof was a challenging endeavor, as these syndicates excelled at operating on the fringes of legality. They often masked illicit dealings behind legitimate-looking businesses, making it difficult for law enforcement to dismantle their networks. The Yam case vividly illustrated this ongoing struggle, revealing both the extent of infiltration and the obstacles faced in breaking such clandestine operations. The Hells Angels, contrary to their public image as motorcycle enthusiasts, had a documented history of involvement in drug trafficking, extortion, and violent acts across Europe and North America. In the Netherlands, authorities had long aimed to curb their influence, but the group's tight-knit, secretive culture and unwavering loyalty made infiltration a formidable task. However, the case against Yam provided law enforcement with a rare opportunity to strike a significant blow. Suspicion first arose in the early 2000s when irregularities in financial records at a nightclub linked to the group came to light. It was only after whistleblower accounts, some from employees who had fled out of fear, that the full picture emerged. These accounts described coercion, blackmail, and intimidation tactics used by Hells Angels members against staff and managers, revealing how the establishment had evolved from a controversial business into a key asset for a major criminal organization. A pivotal element of the case was the testimony of a former security guard recruited to oversee safety, who later cooperated with authorities. He had believed his role was merely safeguarding the venue, but in reality, he was enforcing unwritten rules, suppressing employee speech, intimidating unruly customers, and handling unrecorded cash transactions. His eventual defection proved crucial. Despite this breakthrough, bringing the case to court posed ongoing challenges, as lawyers defending Yam argued that certain operations fell within the bounds of business activity, complicating efforts to prove criminal intent. Although the establishment may have attracted some questionable clientele, there was no definitive evidence to suggest it was directly controlled by a criminal organization. Advocates argued that the brothel operated legally within the framework set by Dutch authorities, and warned that shutting it down could create a risky precedent for similar enterprises across the nation. Nonetheless, investigators had collected enough circumstantial and direct evidence to challenge these claims. They discovered financial ties between the club's operations and well-known members of the Hells Angels, with large sums of money moving between the two entities. Wiretaps and surveillance footage reinforced suspicions that Yab Yum had evolved from a high-end venue into a front for organized criminal activities. Furthermore, interviews with former employees and financial analysts indicated significant money laundering occurring behind the scenes. By late 2007, the City Council of Amsterdam moved decisively to revoke Yab Yum's operating license. The owners resisted, appealing and claiming unfair persecution, but mounting pressure from law enforcement and government officials led courts to dismiss their pleas. In January 2008, the verdict was final. The license was revoked, and the club was shut down permanently. The closure reverberated through the country, serving as a potent reminder that, even in a society known for its pragmatic approach to vice-related industries, the rule of law remained firmly in force. It also signaled the government's willingness to confront entrenched criminal networks, even when they were embedded within seemingly legitimate businesses. However, shutting Yab Yum was merely a spark that ignited a broader crackdown against organized crime in the Netherlands. In the weeks afterward, authorities intensified their efforts against groups linked to the Hells Angels, raiding other suspect businesses and making numerous arrests. While law enforcement celebrated these successes, many within the criminal world quickly adapted. The shutdown of Yab Yum disrupted certain income streams, but did not eliminate the demand for illegal services. Several former clients shifted to alternative venues, many operating more covertly. Over the following years, organized crime groups evolved to become more sophisticated in concealing their activities. Public reaction remained divided. Some praised the government's determined action, while others questioned whether closing a single business truly addressed the underlying issues fueling organized crime. The crackdown on criminal enterprises achieved little in dismantling the larger networks that initially facilitated these illegal activities. This sparked significant debate about the broader effects on Amsterdam's sex industry, raising questions about whether other legal establishments might face similar interventions. There were concerns that stricter regulations could push such operations underground, making them even more difficult for authorities to monitor and control. Moreover, it prompted reflection on whether future efforts could truly prevent criminal elements from infiltrating other legitimate businesses. Despite these uncertainties, one point was unmistakable. The closure of the infamous Yab Yum marked a pivotal moment in the Netherlands' ongoing campaign against organized crime. It served as a clear message that no enterprise, no matter how prominent or well established, was beyond the reach of the law. While the fight against these groups persisted, authorities remained dedicated to limiting opportunities for illegal actors to operate within the formal economy. In the aftermath of Yab Yum's shutdown, investigations persisted. Several individuals associated with the Hells Angels linked to the case faced legal action, although some involved had yet to be identified. Recognizing vulnerabilities in certain industries, the government began introducing tighter regulations aimed at sectors susceptible to criminal infiltration. Yet, many understood that organized crime is a constantly evolving challenge, capable of adapting and exploiting systemic loopholes. The closure of Yab Yum was a victory, but only one chapter in a much broader struggle requiring ongoing vigilance, innovation, and unwavering resolve. The consequences of the expulsion from Yab Yum extended well beyond the brothel itself. The case uncovered profound infiltration of organized crime into Amsterdam's sex sector and highlighted broader concerns about how such organizations operated within the Dutch economy at large. In response, the government implemented new policies, investigations, and enforcement measures to address these issues. However, the criminal underworld continued to evolve, soon shifting tactics to evade detection and enforcement efforts. In the weeks following the court decision, former staff at Yab Yum shared troubling stories of coercion, intimidation, and violence connected to the Hells Angels. Women who worked at the establishment recounted how control had gradually shifted from legitimate management to members of the motorcycle club. Once a luxurious venue serving wealthy clients, it had become a heavily controlled operation used for money laundering and illicit trade. Several employees reported threats of violence if they refused orders, illustrating the deep entrenchment of criminal influence and the ongoing struggle to eradicate it. For many years, law enforcement agencies suspected that organized crime groups were exploiting legitimate businesses to conceal their financial activities. The Yab Yum scandal offered a stark illustration of how deeply these illicit networks had infiltrated the economy. Already under international scrutiny for their progressive policies on drugs and sex work, Dutch authorities faced mounting pressure to intensify their efforts against such pervasive influence. In response, the government launched a series of intensified investigations into various enterprises believed to serve as fronts for criminal operations. A major measure taken after the scandal was a renewed push for transparency within the nation's vice industries. Amsterdam introduced tighter regulations for licensed establishments, mandating more comprehensive background checks on proprietors, conducting regular financial audits, and strengthening cooperation between law enforcement and financial oversight agencies. Forensic accounting techniques were increasingly employed to track suspicious financial transactions, aiming to intercept illicit funds before they could be integrated into the legal economy. Despite these proactive steps, the criminal underworld remained resilient. As Yab Yum was closed, new underground venues emerged, often operating discreetly in private apartments or unmarked buildings. These covert businesses were far less visible and significantly harder to regulate. Such illegal establishments posed heightened risks to workers who lacked the protections afforded by licensed venues. Reports indicated a rise in human trafficking, with vulnerable individuals being exploited by organized groups that had shifted their activities underground. The legal proceedings against Yab Yum's management extended well beyond its closure. The business owners filed multiple appeals, claiming that they had been unfairly targeted while other questionable businesses continued to operate. They maintained that, although criminal groups might have tried to influence the establishment, the venue itself was not complicit. Ultimately, these appeals were dismissed, yet the case ignited broader societal discussions about the boundaries between legitimate enterprises and organized crime. The shutdown of Yab Yum also prompted authorities to scrutinize other sectors believed to be exploited by criminal organizations. Investigations expanded into bars, nightclubs, and even seemingly legitimate investment firms suspected of laundering money for illicit purposes. Several high-profile raids followed, resulting in multiple arrests and the confiscation of millions of euros worth of illegal assets. Despite these efforts, challenges persisted in fully dismantling the pervasive influence of organized crime across different industries. Many argued that government efforts arrived too late, pointing out that organized crime had already deeply infiltrated the Dutch economy. Simply shutting down a prominent establishment like Yum was insufficient to dismantle networks that had been built over decades. Others warned that stricter rules for legitimate businesses could inadvertently push criminal activities further underground, making detection even more challenging. A lasting impact of the Yum case was its effect on public perception of organized crime in the Netherlands. For years, the country's liberal stance on drugs and prostitution was viewed as relatively harmless, with activities remaining visible and somewhat manageable. However, revelations about the Hells Angels' influence over Yum shattered this assumption, revealing that organized crime was actively operating within the nation's heart. It was manipulating sectors meant to be transparent and regulated, unsettling many citizens. In response, the Dutch government recognized the need to restore public trust. Authorities increased funding for specialized law enforcement agencies tackling organized crime. New task forces were established to monitor known criminal groups, including motorcycle clubs. The judiciary adopted a tougher stance, sentencing individuals with suspected links to organized crime more severely for financial crimes, trafficking, and extortion. The case drew international attention, inspiring other European nations battling similar issues. Countries like Germany, France, and Belgium observed Dutch strategies and began implementing comparable measures to impede criminal infiltration of lawful businesses. The European Union intensified efforts against money laundering, pushing for stronger financial oversight to prevent illicit funds from moving across borders. Over time, Yum's name faded from the headlines, yet the case remained emblematic of the ongoing struggle between authorities and organized crime. While closing the brothel was seen as a victory, it also underscored how adaptable criminal networks could be. When authorities dismantled one operation, another often emerged, frequently more discreet and difficult to detect. For those directly affected, former employees, law enforcement, and clients, the legacy of Yum was complex. Some viewed it as a necessary step toward cleaning Amsterdam's underground scene, while others saw it as only the beginning of a much more challenging battle requiring continuous vigilance and evolving strategies. In the end, the Yum case served as a stark reminder that combating organized crime is a persistent effort, demanding persistent adaptation. In the early days of January 2008, the tranquil landscape of Blood Mountain in Georgia became the scene of a devastating crime that drew widespread attention. Meredith Hope Emerson, a 24-year-old graduate of the University of Georgia, had embarked on a routine hike on New Year's Day, accompanied by her faithful black Labrador, Ella. Known for her spirited nature and love of nature, Meredith's decision to explore the Appalachian Trail was typical of her adventurous personality. Sadly, that hike would become her final journey. Witnesses later recounted seeing Meredith walking along the Freeman Trail, a popular route leading to the mountain's summit, alongside an older man with a reddish dog. This individual was later identified as Gary Michael Hilton, a 61-year-old drifter with a history of unpredictable behavior. Unknown to Meredith, Hilton had been lurking in the area, preying on hikers in solitude. When Meredith failed to return home, her friends and family grew increasingly worried, prompting a swift search involving volunteers and law enforcement scouring the rugged terrain. On January 3rd, search parties found her 1,995 Chevrolet Cavalier abandoned near the trailhead. Inside the vehicle, investigators discovered her belongings, including a water bottle and a police baton, indicating a struggle had taken place. The investigation gained urgency when authorities learned Hilton had been seen at a gas station shortly after Meredith's disappearance, cleaning out his van. Further evidence mounted when police found traces of blood in Hilton's vehicle that matched Meredith's DNA, linking him to the crime. Under increasing pressure, Hilton confessed to kidnapping and murdering Meredith, leading investigators to a secluded area in the Dawson Forest Wildlife Management Area, where her body was subsequently recovered. His arrest revealed a disturbing pattern. Hilton was later connected to multiple murders in various states, earning the nickname the National Forest Serial Killer. His typical method involved targeting individuals in remote, wooded areas, exploiting their isolation. The tragic loss of Meredith Emerson served as a stark reminder of the hidden dangers even in peaceful outdoor settings. Her story garnered intense media coverage and prompted discussions about safety protocols for outdoor enthusiasts. Today, her legacy endures as a cautionary tale about vigilance and the importance of awareness when venturing into nature's solitude. As investigators examine the timeline of Meredith Emerson's final days, her spirited nature shone through. A stark image of her abduction gradually took shape. The rugged slopes of Blood Mountain, typically a peaceful haven for hikers and nature lovers, had unwittingly become the hunting ground for a relentless predator. For years, Gary Michael Hilton had prowled the Appalachian trails, seamlessly blending into the outdoor community, patiently awaiting opportunities to strike. Living out of his white Astro van and lacking a permanent residence, Hilton's unsettling presence had previously alarmed fellow hikers, yet it had never led to his apprehension. Meredith, an experienced hiker and former martial arts practitioner, fought courageously during her initial struggle. She managed to seize a police baton she carried for self-defense, but Hilton quickly overpowered her. Forensic analysis later confirmed signs of a fierce confrontation. Blood splatters inside Hilton's vehicle and defensive injuries on Meredith suggested she resisted fiercely, not going down quietly. Despite being restrained, her resilience endured, evidenced by her mental alertness and physical resistance, which bought her additional time. Witness accounts and surveillance footage placed Hilton and Meredith at various locations in the days following her abduction, indicating she survived the initial attack. To keep her under control, Hilton forced her to disclose ATM PIN codes. He drove her from one machine to another, attempting to steal from her bank account, but Meredith repeatedly provided incorrect PINs, delaying his plans. Growing frustrated, Hilton reportedly confided that he had intended to end her life the first night, but decided against it after realizing how much trouble she could cause him. Law enforcement agencies worked tirelessly to locate Meredith in those crucial hours after her disappearance. Reports from hikers who had seen her with an unfamiliar man intensified the urgency of the search. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation collaborated closely with local authorities tracking Hilton's movements. The breakthrough came when a gas station attendant in Cumming, Georgia, spotted Hilton meticulously cleaning his van and discarding items into a nearby trash bin. A vigilant bystander familiar with the case provided police with vital information leading directly to Hilton. When officers finally apprehended him on January 4th, Hilton appeared composed, almost indifferent. Inside his van, forensic teams uncovered compelling evidence: a blood-stained piece of Meredith's clothing, strands of her hair, and various weapons. Confronted with this damning evidence, Hilton initially denied involvement, but as authorities pressed him, his facade crumbled. Eventually, he admitted to kidnapping Meredith. His statements revealed a calculated and remorseless mindset. He claimed to have kept her alive for nearly 4 days before deciding to end her life, initially contemplating releasing her, but ultimately choosing to do so out of fear that she might pose a threat to him. The investigation soon revealed that Hilton's actions were both calculated and brutal. He lured Meredith into the dense woods of Dawson Forest, a remote area far from any trail or road. There, he forced her to kneel before repeatedly striking her in the head with a car jack handle. He later claimed he chose blunt force over a firearm to show mercy, sparing her from greater suffering. After confirming her death, Hilton dismembered Meredith's body in a bid to hide evidence. He placed her severed head and other remains into plastic bags and tried to scatter them across different parts of the forest. The chilling precision and cruelty of his acts shocked even veteran investigators. His confession led law enforcement to the gruesome discovery of Meredith's remains on January 7th. The news of her death cast a shadow across Georgia and beyond. Meredith was a lively young woman, loved for her warm smile and zest for life, making her tragic loss all the more heartbreaking. It soon became evident that Hilton was a long-standing predator, preying on vulnerable individuals. As he sat in custody, investigators realized they had more than a single case. Their efforts prompted authorities in neighboring states to re-examine unsolved disappearances linked to secluded hiking spots. The more investigators dug, the clearer it became that Meredith's murder was not an isolated incident. Similar clues linked her case to others, such as the disappearance of Cheryl Dunlap, a 46-year-old nurse and Sunday school teacher from Florida. Cheryl vanished in December of 2007, just weeks before Meredith's death, under eerily comparable circumstances. Witnesses had seen her car abandoned near a national forest, and security cameras captured an unidentified man, later identified as Hilton, attempting to withdraw money from her bank account. Cheryl's body was eventually discovered with signs of a violent assault mirroring Meredith's case. As evidence mounted, Hilton was formally charged not only with Meredith's murder, but also with multiple crimes across state borders. His background revealed a disturbing history of violence, manipulation, and frequent movement through small towns and wilderness areas, always targeting those most vulnerable and alone. Meredith's case served as a wake-up call, highlighting the risks posed by remote parks and hiking trails. Once regarded as tranquil places of nature's peace, these spots were now recognized as potential sites for danger. In the months following her death, law enforcement in Georgia introduced new safety protocols, including increased patrols and public awareness campaigns focused on self-defense in isolated areas. Meredith's family and friends dedicated their efforts to honoring her memory, establishing the Meredith Hope Emerson Foundation to advocate for victims' rights and wilderness safety. Her loyal dog, Ella, survived the ordeal, symbolizing a small hope amidst tragedy. Later, one of Meredith Emerson's close friends adopted her belongings, serving as a living tribute to Meredith's compassion and bravery. While Hilton waited for his trial, the full scope of his crimes remained under investigation, and the true number of victims he had harmed might never be fully known. Yet, it was clear that his reign of terror had been brought to an end, and justice for Meredith was imminent. The trial of Gary Michael Hilton in Georgia was swift and conclusive. Overwhelming evidence, including his own confession, left little doubt about his guilt. In January of 2008, just weeks after Meredith's death, Hilton agreed to plead guilty to her kidnapping and murder in exchange for a life sentence without parole. This deal aimed to spare Meredith's family a lengthy trial ordeal and prevent Hilton from seeking appeal or pursuing any hope for early release. However, the resolution in Georgia did not mark the end of Hilton's criminal activities. Investigators in Florida and North Carolina worked tirelessly to hold him accountable for other similar crimes, revealing a darker pattern. Their pursuit uncovered chilling details of Hilton's past as a serial attacker targeting unsuspecting hikers across the southeastern United States over many years. One notable case linked to Hilton was the violent murder of Cheryl Dunlap, a 46-year-old nurse and Sunday school teacher from Florida. She had vanished in December 2007, just weeks before Meredith's fate. Her car was abandoned near the Apalachicola National Forest, and her body was eventually found in the woods. Like Meredith, Cheryl had been held captive before her death, with her remains later found decapitated, a likely attempt to thwart identification. Security footage captured Hilton attempting to withdraw money from her bank account, mirroring his behavior with Meredith. In Florida, prosecutors sought the highest penalty available, the death sentence, given the brutality of the crime. The case went to trial in February of 2011, where the jury heard disturbing details about Cheryl's final days. Forensic evidence, witness testimonies, and Hilton's own confessions left no doubt about his guilt. After only a few hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to death, marking the first formal sentence of capital punishment against him. While Hilton awaited execution in Florida, prosecutors in North Carolina prepared to bring charges for yet another crime, the murder of John and Irene Bryant. This elderly couple had vanished while hiking in Pisa National Forest in October of 2007. Irene's body was discovered first, showing signs of blunt force trauma, and months later John's remains were recovered. Hilton's familiarity with his victims' routines, including forcing them to reveal ATM pins before killing, had once again placed him near the scene. Bank records and surveillance footage helped solidify the link, further implicating him in this and possibly other unpunished crimes. The chilling details of the crimes against Hilton only deepened the case's complexity, especially after it emerged that he had been hunting in protected natural areas for years. This revelation shocked both law enforcement and the public, highlighting how meticulously he selected his victims, often those isolated in remote locations where screams would go unheard and police presence minimal. The case of Meredith Emerson in particular exposed the lurking dangers of such wilderness trails, sparking increased safety initiatives along the Appalachian Trail and similar hiking routes. Authorities responded by installing more surveillance cameras at trailheads, distributing safety information, and urging hikers to travel in groups rather than alone. Meredith's tragic story became a catalyst for nationwide outdoor safety efforts. Despite facing multiple convictions and awaiting execution in Florida, Hilton remained a focus of investigations into other unresolved cases. His nomadic lifestyle and ability to move unnoticed across the southeastern United States hindered efforts to trace all his potential victims, leaving the full scope of his crimes uncertain. While Hilton awaited his sentence, Meredith's loved ones worked tirelessly to ensure her legacy extended beyond her loss. They created the Meredith Hope Emerson Memorial Fund, supporting organizations that promoted outdoor safety and self-defense, especially for women. Her memory lived on through countless hikers who carried her story as a reminder to remain vigilant amid nature's tranquility. For many, Hilton was not just a criminal, but a terrifying symbol of the hidden dangers lurking in seemingly peaceful places. He exploited the very qualities that drew people outdoors, solitude and escape, turning them into deadly traps. His talent for integrating into natural environments, disguising himself as an innocent traveler, made him one of law enforcement's most formidable and dangerous figures in recent years. Though justice was ultimately served, the emotional scars persisted. Families of victims struggled with the pain of losing loved ones to a heartless predator. Yet amidst the sorrow, resilience endured. Meredith's courage, resisting her attacker even in her final moments, became an inspiring example of strength and determination. Her quick thinking, notably refusing to reveal her ATM PIN for days, bought crucial time that allowed authorities to track Hilton down before he could harm others. As years went by, the case drifted from public headlines, but its effects remained vivid. The story of Meredith Emerson became more than a tragedy. It became a testament to human resilience, bravery, and the enduring power of the human spirit. Her memory continued to motivate safety awareness and inspired ongoing efforts to protect individuals enjoying the outdoors. Even in the face of extreme adversity, the refusal to surrender exemplifies a profound will to endure, turning tragedy into a beacon of resilience. Hilton's crimes, leaving behind a trail of devastation, cannot erase the enduring memory of those he affected, particularly Meredith Emerson. Her story has since become a lasting symbol of hope, illustrating that even amid darkness, courage and perseverance can prevail. Gary Michael Hilton remains awaiting execution in Florida, a reminder that his name may eventually fade, but the impact of his actions, especially on the lives he touched, will never be forgotten. In early January of 2008, the peaceful community of Lower Allow Township, Pennsylvania, was unexpectedly rattled by an incident that would resonate deeply within its residents. The local high school, known for its close community and dedicated staff, suddenly became the scene of a disturbing event that exposed the fragile safety of seemingly secure environments. On January 8th, as students began their morning routines, a 13-year-old student named Ian Chimeno entered a classroom wielding a knife and a blowtorch. Without warning, he attacked several classmates, stabbing 3 before staff could intervene. During the chaos, Chimeno used the blowtorch to hold staff and students at bay, creating a tense and frightening standoff. Eventually, teachers managed to subdue him, preventing further harm. The injured students were quickly transported to nearby hospitals, where they received treatment and survived. Nonetheless, the incident left lasting psychological scars on everyone involved, raising serious concerns about school safety and the factors driving such violence. In the days afterwards, authorities launched a detailed investigation into Chimeno's background to understand what led a young teenager to commit such an act. Interviews with classmates and teachers painted a complex picture, Some described him as introverted and socially isolated, with few friends, while others revealed he had been subjected to bullying, possible contributing factors to his emotional turmoil. Mental health professionals assessed Chimeno's state, indicating he might have been battling untreated issues like depression and anxiety. Depression, coupled with social rejection and internal struggles, likely created a volatile situation that erupted prematurely in the early morning hours of that January. This shocking event sparked wide-ranging discussions about the importance of school safety and mental health support for students. Parents questioned how a young student could bring weapons into school unnoticed, demanding strengthened security measures and better protective protocols. The school administration faced significant scrutiny, prompted to reevaluate procedures to prevent such tragedies from recurring and to address the mental health needs of their students. Following the tragic event at Antietam Middle School, the local community in Lower Alao Township faced intense shock and sorrow. A 13-year-old student assaulted classmates with a knife and a blowtorch, injuring 3 individuals and igniting urgent concerns about school safety and mental health. This devastating incident prompted reflections on the vulnerabilities within the educational environment and the psychological well-being of students. In the wake of the attack, authorities and school officials meticulously reconstructed the sequence of events. The young assailant, whose name remains confidential due to his age, arrived at his English classroom that morning clad in a dark trench coat. This sudden display of behavior raised alarm among staff and peers alike, highlighting the importance of vigilance and early intervention. To bolster security, the school district implemented several measures aimed at preventing similar tragedies. Metal detectors were installed at all entrances as a precautionary step, and a new policy required students to carry clear backpacks, making concealed objects more difficult to hide. The district also increased the presence of school resource officers and supplied staff with specialized training to identify signs of potential violence or distress among students. Recognizing that mental health plays a vital role in preventing such incidents, the district expanded access to counseling services and formed partnerships with local mental health organizations. These collaborations facilitated on-site support for students and fostered programs that promoted an inclusive, caring school climate. Anti-bullying initiatives were strengthened, encouraging students to voice concerns about peers who seemed troubled, with the aim of addressing issues before they escalate. Legal proceedings involving the young attacker were complex due to his age. Officials considered whether to try him as a juvenile or as an adult. After careful deliberation, it was decided he would face juvenile court, emphasizing rehabilitation over punishment. His defense team highlighted his mental health struggles and history of bullying, portraying him as a troubled youth needing treatment and support. The court ultimately sentenced him to a juvenile detention facility where he would receive counseling and educational services tailored to address the underlying causes of his behavior. The incident at Antietam Middle School starkly illuminated the challenges faced by educational institutions in safeguarding their students. It underscored the critical need for early intervention, mental health resources, and a nurturing school environment where young individuals feel safe and valued. While Lower Alao Township continues to recover from that difficult day, the lessons learned have spurred meaningful changes aimed at preventing future violence and ensuring the safety of all students. One day, an incident unfolded at a school when a student, without warning, suddenly pulled out an MP3 player and then brandished a knife, launching a violent attack on nearby students. This unpredictable act triggered widespread panic as chaos erupted in the classroom. The attacker overturned desks, scattered books, and set off firecrackers, further fueling the sense of crisis among students, teachers, and staff. Quick-thinking school personnel responded promptly to restrain him, preventing injuries from becoming more severe. The 3 students who were struck with blades received immediate treatment at a nearby medical facility and were fortunate to leave with only minor wounds. An investigation revealed that the attacker had arrived at school carrying a small container of gasoline, a water bottle filled with torch fluid, along with several knives, firecrackers, and face masks designed to filter out fumes, an arsenal indicating deliberate planning. Such preparations alarmed authorities and the community alike, highlighting the concerning level of premeditation involved. Central Berks Regional Police Sergeant Ronald Aksinski announced that the student faced multiple charges, including several counts of aggravated assault, recklessly endangering others, causing or risking a catastrophe, criminal mischief, and possession of a weapon on school grounds. He was placed in custody at the Berks County Juvenile Detention Center as authorities prepared for the next steps in the legal process. In the days following the attack, the school reopened amid heightened security protocols. Police officers were stationed at the main entrance, which was the only accessible point, and used handheld metal detectors to screen all students. Bags were thoroughly searched, leading to the confiscation of minor items such as pocket knives, but no serious threats were uncovered. Officer Ray Serapin observed that the security procedures went smoothly, and all students were checked before entering the building. This event sparked a broad community discussion about the adequacy of existing safety measures and emphasized the importance of addressing students' mental health. Parents and educators questioned how such weapons could have been smuggled into the school unnoticed, raising concerns about preventative strategies for similar incidents. In response, the school system reviewed and strengthened their security policies, introducing even stricter controls. Mental health assessments of the attacker pointed to significant emotional distress, possibly worsened by social isolation or bullying experiences. These findings reinforced the need for early intervention programs and supportive services within schools to identify troubled students before crises occur. Consequently, the district expanded access to counseling and launched initiatives aimed at fostering a more inclusive and caring environment. Anti-bullying campaigns intensified, encouraging students to voice concerns about their peers' well-being. Ultimately, the goal was to nurture a school culture rooted in safety, support, and mutual understanding. Following the incident at Antietam Middle and Senior High School, students felt a renewed sense of safety that encouraged openness and seeking help, crucial steps in preventing future tragedies. The legal process concerning the young perpetrator, Salient, was complicated due to his age and the seriousness of his actions. The juvenile justice system sought a careful balance, holding him accountable while offering avenues for rehabilitation. Emphasis was placed on providing the support needed to address the underlying issues that fueled the incident. This case also shed light on the difficulties faced when dealing with serious offenses by minors, highlighting the need for a justice approach adaptable to such complex situations. As the community of Lower Allow Township processed that traumatic day in January, there emerged a shared determination to learn from the event and to enhance safety measures for all students. The attack starkly revealed the vulnerabilities within educational environments and underscored the urgent necessity of proactive strategies to mitigate risks. In the months afterward, efforts by the school district to bolster security and support systems were met with cautious optimism. While no measures could ensure absolute safety, these steps demonstrated a clear commitment to fostering a more secure and nurturing space for students and staff alike. The incident at Antietam High became a turning point, prompting a thorough review of policies and practices aimed at preventing violence and safeguarding the well-being of everyone connected to the school. In the aftermath of the January 8th incident in 2008, the community faced the difficult challenge of healing and rebuilding trust within its educational setting. The attack, during which a 13-year-old student assaulted classmates with a knife and used a blowtorch, left 3 students injured and many others emotionally shaken. As the immediate shock faded, attention shifted to understanding what led to such a violent outburst. Investigations uncovered that Salient had left a note for his mother reading, "Mom, I'm so sorry, I love you, goodbye," signaling premeditation and personal turmoil. Described as a quiet individual, he had shown signs of distress recently, though his struggles went largely unnoticed until the tragedy unfolded. Legal proceedings proved complex due to his age and the gravity of his conduct. Authorities charged him with several offenses, including aggravated assault and reckless endangerment. The juvenile justice system aimed to hold him accountable while offering a chance for rehabilitation, recognizing that addressing the root causes was vital for preventing future incidents. This approach reflected an understanding of the importance of supporting troubled youth and fostering reform. Responding to the attack, the school district introduced a series of initiatives to improve security and support mechanisms. These measures aimed to reduce vulnerabilities and create a safer environment, acknowledging that while perfection was unattainable, consistent effort could significantly enhance overall safety. The incident served as a catalyst for meaningful change, inspiring a reassessment of policies and practices intended to protect students and staff, and to nurture an environment where learning and safety could coexist. On February 17, 2008, the lively streets of Geelong, Singapore, renowned for their vibrant nightlife and rich cultural tapestry, became the site of a tragic incident that profoundly affected the local community. During a routine walk along Geelong Drive, two Chinese construction workers, Xiao Ruan and Wu Jun, encountered two men attempting to rob them. This encounter quickly escalated into a violent assault, revealing the darker side of urban life and the devastating impact of violent crimes. The assailants, driven by a misguided sense of desperation and opportunism, were a Malaysian man named Jiang Ko, age 24, and his accomplice. Ko, originally from Sarawak, had traveled to Singapore in search of improved economic prospects. That night, fueled by reckless impulsiveness, Ko and his partner targeted Xiao and Wu, believing they might be carrying valuables. As the confrontation unfolded, Ko grabbed a tree branch and, in a surge of aggression, struck Xiao multiple times on the head. The severity of the blows caused 14 skull fractures, injuries that ultimately proved fatal. Wu Jun managed to escape physically unscathed, but was deeply traumatized by witnessing his friend's brutal assault. Xiao was rushed to the hospital, where medical teams fought desperately to save him. Despite their efforts, the extent of his injuries was overwhelming, and he succumbed to his wounds 6 days later. His death sent shockwaves through both local and expatriate communities, casting a bleak shadow over the vibrant neighborhood and highlighting the perilous consequences of violence in the city. On a tragic night in February 2008, a brutal assault in Singapore ended with the death of 40-year-old Chinese national Chia Ruan during a robbery. The incident prompted a swift and meticulous investigation by the local police, renowned for their efficiency and thoroughness. Following detailed detective work, they identified two suspects, both Malaysian nationals, named Ko Jabing and Giling Anakwat. Both men were promptly detained and formally charged with murder under Section 300C of the Penal Code, which carried a mandatory death sentence. The subsequent trial drew significant public attention, shining a spotlight on the brutal nature of the crime. The prosecution depicted a heinous and senseless attack, highlighting the severity of the injuries inflicted on the victim. In contrast, the defense argued that Ko's actions were motivated by a desire for robbery, asserting that causing death was not premeditated and that the fatal outcome was unintentional. In 2010, both Ko and Giling were convicted of murder and received the death penalty, as stipulated by Singaporean law at that time. However, legal reforms introduced in 2012 gave judges discretion to impose life imprisonment in certain cases of murder, which led to a resentencing hearing for Ko in 2013. His sentence was then commuted to life imprisonment, complemented by 24 strokes of the cane. The case took yet another turn when the prosecution appealed the reduced sentence. In January 2015, the Court of Appeal reinstated the death penalty for Ko, citing the brutality of the assault and a blatant disregard for human life. This judicial affirmation reflected the country's firm stance on violent crimes and the importance of justice for victims. Throughout this legal process, debates emerged surrounding the death penalty, judicial discretion, and the prospects for reform and rehabilitation. Supporters for Ko highlighted his remorse and potential for positive change, while others emphasized the need for strict penalties to prevent such heinous acts. After exhausting all avenues of appeal and clemency requests, Ko Jabing was executed in May 2016, leaving a lasting impact on discussions about capital punishment, justice, and societal values. The tragic events of that February night serve as a somber reminder of how desperation and violence can have devastating consequences. They also underscore the ongoing struggle within the legal system to balance justice, deterrence, and the possibilities of reform, illustrating the profound and complex effects such crimes have on victims, their loved ones, and the community at large. In 2010, the authorities reported that Ko Jabing assaulted Chow repeatedly with a tree branch, resulting in 14 fractures to his skull and significant internal bleeding. The violence was starkly emphasized by the fact that Ko continued striking Chow even after he stopped resisting. Giling Anakwat was identified as an accomplice, having taken part in the robbery that ultimately escalated into the fatal assault. The defense for both alleged that their sole intention was robbery, not causing death. Ko claimed to be under the influence at the time and lacked the intent to deliver such severe injuries. Giling's legal team argued he was unaware of Ko's intent and did not take part in the attack. On July 30th, 2010, the judge announced his decision, finding that both Ko and Giling shared a common purpose to commit a robbery and that the injuries inflicted on Chow were serious enough to lead to death, thereby fulfilling the criteria for murder as defined under Section 300 of Singapore's Penal Code. As a result, they received mandatory sentences of death. The case, however, was far from settled. Both men appealed their convictions and sentences. In May of the following year, the Court of Appeal upheld Ko Jabing's sentence, confirming his guilt and execution. Conversely, Giling Anakwat's appeal was partly successful. His murder conviction was downgraded to one of robbery with hurt, and he was resentenced to serve an imprisonment of about 18 years and 6 months, along with 19 strikes of a cane. Legal developments in 2013 brought about a significant shift when Singapore amended its laws to grant judges discretion to impose different penalties in particular murder cases. This change opened the door for Ko Jabing to request a review of his sentence. By August of that year, the court decided to convert his death sentence to life imprisonment, accompanied by 24 strokes of the cane. However, the prosecution challenged this decision, arguing that the violent nature of the crime justified reinstating the original penalty. In January of 2015, the Court of Appeal, in a close 5-3 vote, reversed the resentencing and reinstated the death penalty, citing the brutality of the assault and the importance of deterrence. Throughout this extensive legal process, advocates for mercy emphasized Ko's young age at the time, his remorse, and the prospects for rehabilitation. They also highlighted the evolving legal standards and the importance of judicial discretion in capital cases. Despite all petitions and appeals, Ko Jabing's legal options were finally exhausted. On May 20th, 2016, he was executed by hanging at Changi Prison. His execution brought an end to a lengthy and complex legal saga, which had profound implications for Singapore's criminal justice system, especially regarding the application and limits of the death penalty. Jabing's case remains a compelling illustration of the intricate balance in criminal justice between upholding justice, deterring severe crimes, and applying mercy. It continues to fuel discussions on legal reform and ethical considerations related to capital punishment. The story of Ko Jabing, a Malaysian national from Sarawak, has profoundly shaped Singapore's legal landscape, especially regarding the use of the death penalty. His case has become a focal point in debates about judicial discretion and the broader implications of reforming harsh sentencing laws. In 2013, Singapore undertook major modifications to its mandatory death penalty statutes. These reforms granted judges the authority to impose life sentences in specific murder cases, particularly where there was no clear intent to kill. Ko Jabing's case was among the first to be reevaluated under this new legal framework. Initially convicted and sentenced to die in 2010 for a murder committed during a disturbing robbery in 2008, his sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment with caning. However, in a subsequent appeal by the prosecution in January 2015, the Court of Appeal reimposed the death penalty, citing the brutality of his actions and the need for deterrence. The decision to reinstate the death sentence was not universally accepted. It was divided, with the court split 3-2 in favor of the sentence. This narrow majority underscored the complex judicial philosophies surrounding capital punishment. The majority believed that Ko Jabing's actions showed an utter disregard for human life, justifying the harshest penalty. Conversely, the dissenting judges argued that mercy should have played a larger role, considering that he might not have intended to inflict fatal injuries. Following the death sentence's reinstatement, Jabing's legal representatives made numerous efforts to seek clemency. They submitted petitions emphasizing his remorse, youth at the time of the crime, and potential for reform. Several international human rights groups, including Amnesty International and the International Commission of Jurists, also called on the authorities to commute his sentence and consider alternative punishments. Yet, all appeals and petitions were ultimately denied. On May 20th, 2016, Jabing's execution took place, marking a significant moment in Singapore's legal history. Notably, his execution was carried out in the afternoon, deviating from the usual dawn practice. This case continues to influence subsequent legal debates and has impacted sentencing practices, especially regarding judicial discretion in capital cases. Ultimately, Koh Jabing's story has fueled ongoing discussions about the death penalty's role in protecting society and delivering justice for victims. The debate over capital punishment often centers on balancing justice, societal safety, and moral considerations. Advocates for the death penalty argue that its severity is justified by the gravity of certain crimes, emphasizing the importance of upholding the rule of law and deterring heinous acts. They believe the potential for punishment to serve as a strong warning outweighs concerns about its permanence or the risk of error, especially in cases involving particularly egregious offenses. Opponents, however, question the morality of state-sanctioned executions, highlighting the irreversible nature of the penalty and the possibility of judicial mistakes. They advocate for alternative punishments that focus on reform and rehabilitation, emphasizing that justice should encompass compassion and the opportunity for change. The case of CO, with its multiple appeals and a fractured court decision, vividly demonstrates the complexities and fallibility inherent in capital trials. Over the years, Singapore has continued to refine its legal framework, notably introducing reforms in 2013 that granted judges greater discretion in sentencing. Still, the core debate persisted, with incidents like CO's case becoming crucial points of reference. Such cases revealed the persistent tension between delivering justice, maintaining societal order, and showing mercy. Internationally, Colorado's case drew significant attention to Singapore's use of the death penalty, influencing perceptions of its justice system. Human rights organizations used the situation to galvanize broader campaigns for moratoriums and eventual abolition of capital punishment worldwide. Within Singapore, his case has left a lasting mark on legal practice, prompting introspection among judges and lawmakers regarding sentencing standards. It has also shaped subsequent decisions in capital cases, heightening public awareness of the intricate issues surrounding the death penalty. This ongoing discourse questions the role and morality of capital punishment in contemporary society. In summary, Colorado's case is a cornerstone of Singapore's legal history, embodying the delicate interplay between justice and mercy, the challenges inherent in legal reform, and the profound impact of capital sentences. As the nation continues to grapple with these issues, his case serves as a sobering reminder of the heavy responsibilities carried by the judiciary and the far-reaching effects of its decisions on individuals and society as a whole. Turning to a different chapter in legal history, in March of the year 2008, a notable case involved Richard Dickey Scruggs, a highly prominent trial attorney renowned for leading major litigations against tobacco companies and managing Hurricane Katrina insurance claims. His legal career was overshadowed by his involvement in a scandal related to judicial bribery, which ultimately led to his downfall. The controversy focused on a dispute over legal fees earned from Hurricane Katrina settlements, where Scruggs and his firm had garnered substantial sums representing policyholders against insurance firms. Disagreements over how these fees should be divided escalated, culminating in a lawsuit filed by attorney Johnny Jones in Lafayette County, Mississippi. Jones sought a favorable judgment to resolve the fee dispute, but behind the scenes, Scruggs was involved in secretly conspiring to influence the outcome. Circuit Judge Henry Lackey, overseeing the case, became the unwitting catalyst in a significant scandal when a bribery attempt was made to influence his decision. A bribe of $440,000 was offered to Judge Lackey in hopes of securing a favorable ruling. Unaware of the scheme, the judge reported the corrupt proposition to federal authorities, cooperating fully with an FBI investigation that ensued. On the 14th of March, 2008, Richard Scruggs pleaded guilty in federal court to conspiring to bribe Judge Lackey, marking a pivotal moment given his standing within the legal community. Subsequently, Scruggs received a 5-year sentence, emphasizing the serious consequences of corruption. This case exposed vulnerabilities within the justice system and served as a stark reminder of the ethical obligations lawyers hold. Scruggs' downfall not only ended his career, but also cast doubt on his previous successes, highlighting how integrity is essential in maintaining trust in justice. The scandal threw into sharp relief the importance of judicial independence and the damage caused by attempts to manipulate legal processes through unethical practices. As Scruggs faced the court, his once commanding presence was diminished by the weight of his actions. Once celebrated as a defender of ordinary people against powerful corporations, he now appeared humbled, with eyes that betrayed a hint of regret, perhaps not for his deeds, but for having been caught. This incident deeply shook the legal community. Scruggs, long regarded as a champion of justice, revealed the darker realities of high-stakes litigation, where influence, greed, and power can sometimes overshadow fairness. The case originally surfaced months earlier when Judge Lackey, a respected figure in Mississippi, received an unusual offer through intermediaries. Scruggs' associates aimed to sway his decision in a bitter dispute over millions in legal fees stemming from Hurricane Katrina settlements. Already immensely wealthy from previous victories against tobacco companies and insurers, Scruggs sought even greater control, but Lackey refused the bribe. Rather than succumbing, the judge reported the attempt to federal authorities, setting in motion an undercover operation. Over several months, agents recorded meetings, intercepted messages, and gathered compelling evidence, eventually building an airtight case. By March of 2008, the extent of Scruggs' involvement, including charges against his son Z. Scruggs, had become clear. The scandal shocked the legal world as one of its most influential figures faced the full force of federal prosecution, revealing corruption lurking behind legal victories built on principles of justice. Richard Scruggs' only escape, a 5-year prison sentence. Faced with mounting legal troubles, Scruggs accepted a plea deal that spared him a lengthy trial, which would have revealed disturbing truths about his once powerful legal empire. In return for his cooperation, he received a sentence of 5 years behind bars. This decision marked the end of an era as his once pristine reputation was shattered. Those who had celebrated his courtroom victories now whispered about his perceived betrayal, a stark fall reminiscent of the corporate giants and executives he had spent years challenging in court. The irony was palpable. Having spent his career exposing corruption among insurance companies and tobacco conglomerates, Scruggs himself was now seen as a symbol of the very misconduct he once fought against. When the judge pronounced the verdict, Scruggs maintained his composure, though the tension in his posture betrayed the weight of what lay ahead. The judge sternly condemned his attempts to influence the legal process through bribery, emphasizing how such actions compromised the foundations of justice. In a system he had navigated expertly for decades, his disregard for its integrity marked a profound breach of trust. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed as Scruggs was escorted away, cameras capturing every moment of his fall from grace. The crowd's fascination had shifted. Where once he was regarded as a legal hero, now he was seen as a cautionary example, his legacy tarnished by allegations of corruption. His 5-year sentence was merely the start. The repercussions extended far beyond his own fate. His son Zach faced similar legal consequences, ending his promising career before it truly began, while other associates saw their futures damaged by their ties to his scheme. In the end, Scruggs' downfall stemmed from the very greed he had challenged for so many years. As he was led away to serve his time, the world he had once influenced moved forward, leaving behind only echoes of his downfall. jail life was a stark contrast to the high-stakes legal battles and multi-million-dollar settlements he had once commanded. No longer protected by power or influence, he was faced with the humbling routine of a convicted man. Although white-collar offenders are typically housed apart from violent criminals, prison life proved equally humiliating for Scruggs, once a figure of respect and authority in legal circles. Now he was just another inmate in a system he had spent his career working within. Learning the unspoken rules for survival became essential, just as understanding the nuances of law had been before. Meanwhile, the legal community analyzed his case, using it as a lesson about the dangers of arrogance and unchecked ambition. Once celebrated for his legal prowess, Scruggs' story became a stark reminder that integrity and humility are vital, even for those at the highest levels of power. In 2009, a criminal case gripped the nation's attention, revealing the intricate vulnerabilities within the legal and financial systems. Central to this story was Bernard Madoff, a man once celebrated for his influence and distinction in the world of finance. His reputation as a respected professional masked a dark secret. He had masterminded one of the largest and most devastating Ponzi schemes in history. Madoff's exposure sent shockwaves through the financial sector, and his arrest signaled a dramatic turning point in public awareness of corporate malfeasance. The scandal laid bare the dangerous consequences of unchecked greed and ethical lapses among those entrusted with others' money. Was it an isolated failure, or did it point to deeper flaws within the regulatory framework? Many wondered how someone so trusted could have operated in such deception for years without detection. As the case unraveled, it became a symbol of the complex battle between trust and truth in the legal world, illustrating how even respected figures could fall from grace under the weight of their own concealments. The trial drew enormous media attention, offering a sobering lesson. No matter one's reputation, integrity must remain paramount. The fallout from Madoff's conviction extended beyond his personal downfall, prompting industry reforms and sparking ongoing debates about oversight and accountability. His arrest and subsequent sentencing underscored that, in the end, justice prevailed against those who prioritized personal gain over ethical responsibility. Madoff's story remains a potent reminder that prosperity built on deception is fragile, and that no amount of influence can shield one from the consequences of dishonesty. Allen Street was best known as the chairman of Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities, LLC, a company he founded in 1960. Over the years, Madoff built a reputation for consistently delivering above-average returns to his clients, which range from individual investors and charitable organizations to large institutions. His firm was regarded as highly successful, and Madoff himself was viewed as a financial genius. However, behind this facade of achievement, a complex deception was quietly unraveling. Madoff was operating a Ponzi scheme, a type of fraud where earnings paid to earlier investors are funded by the contributions of new investors, rather than from legitimate profits. This setup depends on an endless flow of fresh investments to sustain payouts, creating an illusion of a thriving enterprise. The scheme collapsed amid the financial turmoil of 2008, when the economic downturn prompted many investors to withdraw their funds. The firm lacked sufficient liquidity to meet these redemption requests, exposing the scheme's true nature. On the 12th of December 2008, Madoff was taken into custody and charged with securities fraud. News of his arrest shocked the financial world, as many had entrusted him with their lifelong savings. The scale of his deception was staggering, with estimates suggesting that losses could reach around $65 billion, marking it as the largest fraud of its kind ever discovered. In the following months, investigators uncovered detailed evidence detailing how Madoff had falsified account statements and trading records to give the illusion of consistent profits. He exploited his reputation and influential connections to attract new investors, thereby perpetuating the cycle of deception. The effects were devastating. Countless individuals lost all their savings, while multiple charitable organizations faced closure after losing their endowments. This scandal also cast a shadow over regulatory bodies, including the Securities and Exchange Commission, which had previously been warned about irregularities but failed to stop the fraud. As legal proceedings advanced, Madoff faced numerous charges, including securities and investment advisor fraud, along with charges related to money laundering. The case underscored significant weaknesses within the financial oversight system and prompted widespread calls for reforms to prevent similar schemes. In March of the following year, Madoff pleaded guilty to all charges, expressing remorse for his actions. Subsequently, he was sentenced to 150 years in prison, essentially a lifetime sentence for his age at the time, which was 71. The harshness of the sentence reflected the enormous damage wrought by his crime and was intended as a warning to others contemplating similar acts. The Madoff scandal remains a landmark event in financial history, illustrating the profound consequences of unchecked fraud and regulatory failure. In the United States, Bernie Madoff's downfall starkly highlighted the vulnerability of the financial system to deceit and underscored the necessity of stringent oversight to safeguard investors and uphold market integrity. Though many years had passed since his sentencing, the echoes of his misdeeds continued to resonate through financial circles, affecting victims' lives and even the prison walls that now confined him. His meteoric rise and sudden collapse had transformed him from a revered financier into a lone inmate stripped of influence and power after decades at the top. Once controlling billions of dollars, Madoff now spent his days in a modest cell among inmates whose crimes varied widely, from theft to drug offenses, creating a strange environment of detachment from his own past. For some, he was simply another con artist caught, but others, especially those who had engaged in financial deception themselves, regarded him with a mixture of awe and criticism for the magnitude of his deception. Having nothing left to scheme or manipulate, Madoff's life became a routine of early rises, assigned chores, bland meals, and the stark reality of incarceration. No longer Bernie Madoff, the Wall Street icon, he was just inmate number D54. Yet even behind bars, the repercussions of his actions persisted. Thousands of victims struggled to recover, many suffering losses beyond repair. Entire life savings vanished, leaving individuals penniless in retirement, while charitable foundations folded overnight, leaving their causes unfunded. Families who entrusted their wealth to him faced betrayal not only by the man but also by a financial system that had failed to stop him sooner. The emotional toll matched the financial devastation. Stories emerged of despair, leading some to take their own lives after realizing they had lost everything. Among the most tragic cases was that of French aristocrat and financial manager René K. Magan de Villahouche, who had personally invested millions with Madoff. Unable to accept the magnitude of the loss, he was found dead in his New York office, having taken his life after the scandal broke. Even Madoff's own family endured fallout. His sons, Mark and Andrew, who had worked at the firm, claimed ignorance of their father's fraudulent activities. Despite their claims, the scandal left indelible scars on all involved, revealing the far-reaching consequences of unchecked greed and the profound damage inflicted on innocent lives. The debate over whether they were complicit in the scandal deeply divided many, but regardless of guilt or innocence, all who bore the Madoff name carried its heavy stigma. Unable to withstand the shame and the relentless suspicion, his son Mark took his own life in his apartment on the second anniversary of his father's arrest. Meanwhile, Andrew, his young child, was asleep in the next room, battling cancer, a fight many believed was worsened by the stress and disgrace surrounding his family. He succumbed in 2014, leaving behind a legacy forever tarnished by association. Even as Bernard Madoff aged and his health waned, he remained a figure of contradictions. At times, he expressed remorse, openly acknowledging the pain he caused and admitting that his actions ruined countless lives, including those within his own family. Yet, there were moments when he appeared unable or unwilling to fully grasp the seriousness of his deeds. Occasionally, he downplayed his guilt, implying that his clients should have been more cautious, warning against trusting promises that seemed too good to be true. As the years went by, Madoff's world grew smaller, his health declined further, and he became a frail shadow of the once powerful financier who had built a vast financial empire. Now confined to a prison infirmary battling kidney disease and other ailments, he sought compassionate release in 2020, claiming he was terminally ill with less than a year and a half to live. The authorities, however, refused his request, deeming the severity of his crimes justified maintaining his incarceration. He remained at Butner Prison, where he ultimately spent his final days. On April 14, 2021, Bernard Madoff died at the age of 82. There was no grand farewell, no final act of redemption. His name had long been synonymous with deception. His passing marked the end of a chapter, but offered little solace to those he had betrayed. The financial world continued to evolve, and new scandals emerged, yet the Madoff saga persisted as a stark warning of the dangers posed by unchecked greed and the devastating fallout of deception at the highest levels. In the end, Bernie Madoff was not remembered as a Wall Street icon or a misunderstood genius. His life concluded as that of a man whose ambition and greed ultimately consumed him, leaving behind a trail of ruin and disillusionment. His physical absence did not erase the scars inflicted on his victims, families, or the financial community, scars that would linger long after his name vanished from headlines. While Madoff remained behind bars, the world outside continued to grapple with the aftermath of his crimes. His victims, numbering in the thousands, faced financial devastation, ongoing legal battles, and emotional trauma from betrayal. Many had spent decades amassing fortunes only to see them wiped out in an instant. Retirees who had envisioned a secure future now struggling to cover basic needs. Charitable organizations and individuals alike suffered the consequences of the widespread fraud, underscoring the profound impact of one man's unchecked greed on countless lives. The downfall of those who depended on Madoff's investment firm was a devastating blow, ending their ambitions abruptly in the largest scam of its kind in history. The damage inflicted was staggering, with estimates suggesting total losses reaching approximately $65 billion, though the actual amount of money Madoff had physically stolen was closer to $18 billion. This discrepancy stemmed from the fictitious profits he had falsely promised to clients, wealth that existed only on paper. When his scheme unraveled in December of 2008, it was more than a financial crisis. It was a profound breach of trust that shook the very foundations of the financial system. Investigations into how Madoff managed to sustain his deception for so many years revealed serious weaknesses within the regulatory framework. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the agency tasked with overseeing financial markets, had received numerous warnings about Madoff's suspiciously steady returns. One particularly damaging report came from analyst Harry Markopoulos, who repeatedly flagged that Madoff's consistently positive results defied mathematical logic. Despite these alerts, no effective intervention occurred until the scheme's collapse, exposing critical flaws in oversight and prompting calls for widespread reform. While lawmakers debated solutions intended to prevent a recurrence of such a scandal, many victims faced the grim reality of loss. In efforts to recover their money, victims turned to legal avenues. Irving Picard, appointed as trustee to reclaim funds, worked tirelessly to recover assets obtained by those who had profited from Madoff's fraud, including banks, hedge funds, and individuals who unknowingly received falsely generated returns. His persistent efforts eventually recovered billions of dollars. However, for many, this compensation was insufficient and came too late. The consequences extended deeply into Madoff's family life as well. His wife, Ruth, once enjoying luxury in a high-rise Manhattan penthouse, was ostracized from society. Although she initially defended her husband, she later claimed ignorance of his crimes. She agreed to relinquish nearly all their possessions, leaving her with only a fraction of their former wealth, and moved into a modest rental home in Florida, seeking a quieter existence away from the scandal. Madoff's two sons, Mark and Andrew, who had worked at the family firm, faced relentless public judgment. Despite their insistence that they had been unaware of their father's misconduct, many refused to believe in their innocence. The immense stress took a heavy toll. Mark, unable to cope with the shame and pressure, tragically ended his life in December of 2010, exactly 2 years after his father's arrest. His death left behind a wife and 2 children. Meanwhile, Andrew was diagnosed with a rare cancer which he had previously overcome, but the impact of the scandal and its aftermath weighed heavily on him. The toll of scandal and the grief stemming from his brother's passing took a heavy personal burden on him, leading to his death in 2014 at the age of 48. Even while incarcerated, Matt's fate was inescapable. He was held in a facility with relatively moderate security, yet he faced no special treatment. Fellow inmates, some convicted of violent offenses, viewed him simply as another con artist who had finally been caught, with a few grudgingly acknowledging the extent of his scams. Others regarded him with disdain. As he aged, his health declined, suffering from kidney issues, heart problems, and other ailments common among elderly prisoners. In 2020, he sought release on compassionate grounds, claiming a terminal diagnosis that left him with less than 2 years to live, but the request was denied. The judge ruled that the severity of his crimes outweighed any humanitarian considerations. Bernie Madoff passed away on April 14, 2021, at the age of 82. His death was not marked by public remembrances or expressions of grief. Rather, it was met with indifference. The world remembered him not as the financial mastermind, but as a symbol of greed and fraud, forever tainted as the embodiment of corruption and abuse of trust in the financial sector. The damages caused by his scandal served as lasting lessons, highlighting the dangers of unrestrained greed, lapses in regulatory oversight, and the destructive influence of white-collar misconduct on everyday lives. Although legislation was tightened and regulations strengthened in response, questions persisted about the likelihood of similar schemes recurring. For many victims, the end of Madoff's life offered little closure. Their investments had vanished, their faith broken, and futures irrevocably changed. Some found solace in small victories, recovered assets, new legal standards, or knowing Madoff had spent his final years disgraced. Yet the pain of betrayal remained vivid, trust shattered by someone they had believed in. Ultimately, Bernie Madoff faded into history not as a legendary figure of Wall Street, but as a stark warning. Even the most reputable can hide unimaginable deception, and if something appears too good to be true, it probably is. In another story from 2009, Japan faced a shocking case that revealed the darker side of the country's rapidly growing online dating scene. A 34-year-old woman from Hokkaido, Kei Kajima, was arrested and later convicted for the murders of 3 men she had met through marriage-seeking websites known locally as KTU sites. Her case, dubbed the KTU Killer Incident, underscored the hidden risks lurking in pursuit of love via digital platforms. Kajima posed as a charming, sophisticated woman, often fabricating stories about her background to attract potential suitors. She claimed to be a piano instructor and a food coordinator, even asserting that her father was a professor at the University of Tokyo. These falsehoods, combined with her persuasive manner, earned her the trust of several men, many of whom were seeking marriage. The first known victim was 53-year-old T. Tada, a salaryman from Tokyo, found dead in his home in January 2009 from carbon monoxide poisoning. His death was initially deemed a suicide with no autopsy conducted. However, subsequent investigations uncovered that roughly 17 million yen had been transferred from Tada's bank account to Kajima's shortly before his death. In May of the same year, 80-year-old Kei Ando from Noda, Chiba Prefecture, died in what was first thought to be an accidental house fire. Closer analysis revealed that multiple charcoal briquettes had been placed near his body, suggesting carbon monoxide poisoning. Kajima had also stolen valuable paintings from Ando's residence, further illustrating her pattern of theft and deception. In August of 2009, the case that ultimately led to Kima's arrest involved the death of a 41-year-old man named Yoshi Oid from Tokyo. Oid was discovered deceased inside a rental car parked in Saitama Prefecture, with the official cause listed as carbon monoxide poisoning. However, investigators quickly observed inconsistencies in the suicide scenario and uncovered that Kima had received roughly 4,700,000 yen from Oid, allegedly in connection with the relationship. Digging deeper into Kima's background, authorities uncovered a disturbing pattern. Several suspicious deaths among men she had interacted with over the years. While she was convicted for the murders of Oid and another man, her involvement in at least 4 additional cases dating back to 2007 was suspected. In each of these instances, the victims transferred substantial amounts of money to her before their untimely deaths. Her courtroom trial attracted intense media attention across Japan, as the public was captivated by the stark contrast between her seemingly gentle demeanor and the brutal realities of her crimes. In 2012, she was found guilty of murder and sentenced to the death penalty. Her case underscored the serious risks associated with online dating, highlighting how individuals might exploit the trusting and vulnerable seeking companionship. It also sparked discussions about the need for better safety measures on dating platforms, including thorough background evaluations and cautious approaches when forming digital relationships. As investigations into Kima progressed, law enforcement and prosecutors faced hurdles in establishing her guilt beyond doubt. Unlike violent offenses leaving tangible physical evidence, her methods involved deception, manipulation, and staging deaths to resemble suicides or accidents. Recognizing that circumstantial evidence alone was insufficient, investigators painstakingly reconstructed her relationships with the victims, analyzed financial transactions, and interviewed acquaintances who had narrowly escaped falling prey to her schemes. A particularly troubling aspect of Kima's modus operandi was her ability to identify men suited for her manipulations. Often lonely, desperate for companionship, and financially stable enough to support her lavish lifestyle. She mainly targeted older men, or those socially awkward, exploiting their desire for love and marriage through online platforms. She would craft convincing personas, claiming to come from distinguished families or to have successful careers, all designed to gain their trust. Once she had ensnared her victims, Kima quickly moved to secure financial benefits by persuading them to give her expensive gifts, cover her living costs, or transfer money directly into her accounts. Kima often transferred large sums into her account under the guise of wedding planning or urgent emergencies. She frequently claimed to face financial struggles or needed quick funds for medical expenses, which created a sense of obligation among her partners. Enamored by her charm and the illusion of a future together, many men willingly handed over their money, unaware that they were potentially paving their own downfall. The turning point in her case came when investigators identified a consistent pattern in the deaths of her victims. While many cases initially appeared to be accidental or suicides, detectives noticed striking similarities. All the victims had died from carbon monoxide poisoning, often with charcoal briquettes found nearby. Although charcoal burning suicides are not uncommon in Japan, the recurrence of this particular method, combined with her financial gain from each incident, raised serious suspicions. Further forensic examination indicated that, in several instances, victims had likely been drugged before their exposure to carbon monoxide, making it improbable they had chosen to end their lives willingly. Authorities also observed her behavior after each death. Rather than showing grief, she promptly moved on and sought new partners. Phone records revealed she remained active on dating platforms, communicating with multiple men simultaneously and constantly searching for her next target. Financial records painted a similarly troubling picture: lavish shopping sprees, stays at luxury hotels, and expensive purchases that surpassed her reported income. During her trial, prosecutors carefully detailed her web of deception, citing testimonies from former boyfriends who had escaped her influence. Many described similar experiences, being showered with affection, asked for money, then abruptly discarded when they refused or when she found someone more profitable. Despite overwhelming evidence, Kima insisted she was innocent, portraying herself as misunderstood and claiming her romantic failures were due to bad luck. Her defense argued there was no direct proof linking her to the deaths, emphasizing the absence of eyewitness testimony or forensic evidence explicitly tying her to the incidents. However, the prosecution presented a compelling case, arguing she meticulously planned each death to evade suspicion, exploiting her victims' trust for financial gain. The consistent pattern of her actions, combined with suspicious behavior and financial records, convinced the court that these weren't mere coincidences but calculated acts by a woman with no remorse for her manipulations. The case against Kojima had long been shrouded in controversy, with many viewing her actions as a cold and calculated form of personal gain. As the trial unfolded, public speculation intensified, revealing a society deeply engrossed in the complexities of her character and motives. Media outlets highlighted the stark contrast between her polished appearance, elegant, well-mannered, and seemingly refined, and the brutal nature of her alleged deeds. Some analysts proposed that her cold demeanor and apparent lack of remorse suggested a psychopathic personality lacking genuine empathy. Others believed her calculated facade was a survival strategy, born from a history of financial hardship that pushed her toward deception and ultimately deadly schemes. Throughout the proceedings, Kojima maintained a remarkably composed attitude. She often smirked or displayed a defiant stance in court, showing little sign of remorse or anxiety over her prospects. While many interpreted her stoicism as confirmation of guilt, others saw it as her confidence in outwitting the justice system, as she had done with her previous victims. As the trial drew to a close, the verdict was virtually predetermined in the public mind. Kojima was a manipulative figure who had exploited and damaged lives for her own benefit. Evidence, though mostly circumstantial, was compelling enough to suggest her culpability. When the judge finally announced the verdict in March of the following year, the courtroom was filled with journalists, legal experts, and spectators eager for closure. As the Chief Justice read the ruling, an uneasy hush fell over the room. Kojima, standing calmly in the defendant's box, listened intently, as her guilt was confirmed for the murders of 3 men, Kenzo Ando, Yoshivoi, and another victim. The court sentenced her to the highest punishment, with the decision based on a web of circumstantial clues that, taken together, depicted a chilling pattern of premeditated violence. Despite the absence of direct witnesses or forensic evidence linking her to the exact moments of death, the similarities among the cases, her financial motives, and the number of victims made her guilt clear. Kojima's reaction remained eerily composed. While no outward signs of fear or regret appeared, those present noted a flicker of something in her eyes, perhaps surprise or an awareness that her carefully controlled world was collapsing. When the death sentence was announced, she simply nodded, as if acknowledging an inevitable fate. Nonetheless, she refused to accept full responsibility, immediately launching an appeal on the grounds that the case relied solely on circumstantial evidence. Her legal team argued that there was no concrete proof of poisoning or intentional harm, asserting the case against her was built on assumptions rather than facts. In 2014, an appeals court upheld the original verdict, dismissing arguments that the deaths might have been accidents or suicides, and affirming her guilt. Despite this, Japan's legal system ensures that executions carried out by hanging are rarely swift. The lengthy appeals process and administrative delays can extend the time between sentencing and execution to years or even decades. Aware of this, Kojima persisted in fighting for her life, filing multiple appeals and exploring every opportunity to overturn her sentence. Meanwhile, the families of her victims struggled to find closure, as justice was formally served but could never undo their losses. Some relatives publicly expressed frustration over her perceived lack of remorse, while others feared her execution might be indefinitely delayed, leaving them trapped in a state of ongoing uncertainty. In the years following her conviction, Kojima became a notorious figure in Japan's criminal history, often compared to earlier female offenders like Masumi Hayashi, who poisoned several victims, and Miyuki Uda, who murdered 2 men for money. However, Kojima's case was distinct. She relied on emotional manipulation rather than physical force, exploiting modern dating culture to target lonely men online. Her crimes sparked widespread concern about the dangers lurking in digital matchmaking, prompting calls for more stringent regulation of online dating services. Some firms introduced enhanced identity verification measures, yet preventing individuals with her level of deception remained a challenge. While in prison, Kojima remained resolutely defiant. Unlike many who fade from public view after sentencing, she maintained contact with supporters and even published a book from behind bars. She portrayed herself as a victim of an unjust system, continuing to deny any involvement in her lover's deaths. This stance only intensified public resentment, seen as an attempt to manipulate the narrative. Investigations into her background uncovered a history of financial scams long before her crimes, involving various aliases used to borrow money and run fraudulent schemes. Police suspected she had refined her deception techniques over the years, implying her violent acts were not impulsive but carefully planned, and part of a broader pattern of criminal behavior. Years of meticulous deception and financial manipulation shaped Kojima's actions, which appeared to stem from desperation but were in fact the result of long-practiced cunning. As she awaited her sentence, debates over her punishment intensified. Some legal experts questioned whether the death penalty suited her case, arguing she should have received life imprisonment instead, especially since no direct forensic evidence linked her to a particular crime. Others noted that Japan's justice system rarely imposed capital punishment on women, making her case a rare precedent. Despite this, public sentiment was largely unkind. Her cold, calculated targeting and disposal of vulnerable men, combined with her complete lack of remorse, painted her as one of the most reviled criminals in modern Japanese history. Years slipped by, and Kojima remained incarcerated, persistently appealing her sentence. Unlike many inmates on death row, who tend to withdraw from the world around them, she kept engaging with media and the legal process, refusing to fade away quietly. Whether she would ultimately face execution or continue fighting her fate indefinitely remained uncertain. But one fact was undeniable: Kojima's name would forever be associated not with love, but with treachery. She became recognition as a predator, a woman who exploited romance, alluring men with promises of companionship, only to leave them destitute and lifeless. In doing so, she cemented her place in the annals of crime as a chilling reminder of deception, greed, and the darkness that can hide behind a seemingly innocent smile. In 2009, Indonesia found itself shaken by a legal incident that spotlighted the clash between free expression and defamation statutes in the digital arena. Pride Mosari, a 32-year-old homemaker and mother of two, became the focus of national controversy after she was sued by Omni International Hospital in Tangerang for defamation. Her alleged misconduct involved sending an email to friends criticizing the quality of care she received at the hospital. What was meant as a private account quickly went viral online, spreading across forums and social media. Her trouble began in August of 2008, when she sought treatment for what was initially diagnosed as dengue fever. Dissatisfied with the care provided and how her concerns were handled, she sent an email detailing her grievances and cautioning others about her experience. This message, intended for a small group, rapidly circulated on the internet, drawing widespread attention. The hospital responded by filing civil and criminal charges, claiming her statements damaged their reputation. In May of 2009, the Tangerang District Court found her liable in the civil case, ordering her to pay a fine of roughly $20,500. Simultaneously, the criminal case led to her detention, igniting public outrage. The prosecution's harsh response was seen by many as an overreach, especially given the influence of powerful institutions and individuals involved. The incident cast a stark light on Indonesia's legal landscape, where authorities often acted aggressively against those who voiced criticisms during a politically sensitive period marked by presidential elections. In July of 2009, a series of events unfolded as various individuals connected to PR Mulasari either visited her in jail or publicly expressed their opinions on her case. Support from a group on MySpace and numerous Indonesian blog sites grew rapidly, shining a spotlight on the controversial clauses within Indonesia's Electronic Information and Transactions Law. These provisions, which were already under scrutiny, became even more contentious because of her situation. As a result, PR Mulasari was fined approximately 204 million Indonesian rupiahs, equivalent to around $220,500, fueling widespread public backing. In response, supporters established a Facebook group called Coin Untuck PR, which quickly mobilized financial aid by encouraging people across Indonesia to donate coins to help cover her fine. The level of collective support prompted Omni International Hospital, the plaintiff in her case, to withdraw its civil lawsuit. Later, in June of 2012, Indonesia's Supreme Court overturned PR Molasari's conviction and her jail sentence, marking a pivotal turning point in the nation's legal and societal landscape. Her case underscored the complex tension between strict defamation laws and the safeguarding of free expression in the digital age, highlighting the urgent need for legal reforms that protect the personal rights without restricting open discussion on public topics. While confined in a modest cell at the Tangerang Women's Prison, PR Molasari struggled to understand how a seemingly innocent email intended for close friends had escalated into a national dispute. She had never anticipated that sharing her personal frustration about a hospital visit might trigger a legal process capable of altering her life forever. Her primary concern was not the prison walls, but the prospect of years apart from her two young children. The charges against her stemmed from Indonesia's rigorous defamation statutes, rooted in both the criminal code and the newer electronic information and transactions law enacted in 2008. This law introduced provisions that made digital communication, such as private emails or social media posts, potentially criminal if deemed harmful to someone's reputation. The hospital argued that her email had damaged their reputation, leading to a decline in public trust and financial losses. Their legal team sought a conviction, fighting aggressively, despite widespread public empathy for her plight. Many Indonesians viewed her case as an example of powerful institutions attempting to silence ordinary citizens through legal intimidation. Public support soared as her story spread across newspapers, radio, and television, transforming her into an unexpected symbol of resistance against Indonesia's outdated defamation laws. Bloggers, social media users, and human rights advocates united behind her, launching campaign Coin Untuck PR, an initiative encouraging thousands to contribute coins to support her during this difficult time. People from all walks of life in Indonesia began rallying around a woman facing a hefty fine of nearly 200 million rupiah imposed by the civil court. Donations poured in from citizens who contributed spare change in jars, envelopes, and sacks. Schools, offices, and community centers across the nation became hubs for collecting funds. The case drew widespread attention not only from the public, but also from Indonesia's political sphere. As the legal proceedings unfolded just months before the 2009 presidential elections, political candidates, eager to align with popular sentiment, issued statements supporting the woman, some visiting her during her imprisonment. Others called for a reassessment of the laws that had led to her prosecution. The controversy sparked intense debate concerning freedom of expression, corporate influence over legal processes, and the need for judicial reform. While awaiting trial, her legal team argued passionately that her email was merely a private exchange, voicing personal dissatisfaction toward the hospital. They maintained that the hospital's response, transforming a minor grievance into a full-scale legal assault, was an attempt to intimidate critics and set a precedent to discourage public criticism. The prosecution responded by presenting evidence indicating the email's circulation, asserting that her comments had unjustly damaged the hospital's reputation. They claimed that her negative remarks about the institution's services irresponsibly harmed a vital provider of medical care to the community. Throughout the courtroom proceedings, judges listened closely, aware that their decision could influence broader societal issues. Outside, protests grew louder, with demonstrators demanding justice for the woman and urging a review of the relevant legislation. Support for her gained momentum on social media, with hashtags trending and journalists questioning whether Indonesia was veering toward a climate where citizens feared speaking freely. The swelling public pressure prompted the Supreme Court in late 2009 to overturn her civil fine. However, the criminal case persisted, and she remained caught in legal uncertainty, potentially facing jail time. Despite the increased scrutiny, the campaign to raise funds for her continued vigorously. Remarkably, late in the year, the total donation surpassed the original amount needed for the fine. Meanwhile, the hospital's international branch, perceiving its reputation severely tarnished, decided to withdraw the civil lawsuit, a move widely seen as an attempt to restore its image. The criminal charges, however, still hovered over her, and her trial for alleged defamation continued. By this stage, the case had transcended a personal dispute, symbolizing a larger debate about the limits of free expression and the power dynamics within the legal system. In Indonesia, a case involving a woman named Pride evolved into a potent symbol of the nation's urgent calls for judicial reform. Representatives from the legal community, journalists, and civil society viewed her situation as a stark illustration of how existing defamation laws allowed powerful entities to silence ordinary citizens. Many others had faced similar targeting under the same laws, yet lacked the visibility and public support that Pride's case gained. While she was permitted to reunite with her children during her bail period, the emotional burden of the trial pressed heavily on her. The relentless media scrutiny followed her every step, yet supporters acclaimed her as a hero, while critics saw her more as an emblem of a flawed legal system. As her trial neared its end, the court faced a pivotal choice: uphold the charges and send a mother of two to prison for a simple email, or recognize the wider demand for legal change and acquit her. The outcome was a source of intense anxiety for Pride, who never intended to become a public figure or a political icon. Her goal was merely to share her experience as a dissatisfied patient. Now she stood at the heart of a major legal debate destined to influence Indonesia's approach to free speech. In the closing days of her trial, tension in the country was palpable. What had started as a personal legal matter had become a reflection of broader societal issues: free expression, corporate influence, and the flaws within Indonesia's defamation laws. The courtroom was filled with journalists, legal experts, and supporters who had tracked her case for months. Many debated whether the judiciary would yield to public pressure or uphold the charges against her. Although the civil suit from the hospital was withdrawn, the criminal case persisted. Prosecutors argued that Pride's email breached the controversial 2800 Electronic Information and Transactions Law, which criminalized digital defamation. Although originally aimed at cybercrime, this law had increasingly been used by powerful institutions to suppress dissent. Human rights advocates had criticized its vague wording, warning it could be wielded to imprison individuals for simply sharing opinions online. The defense urged the court to consider that the email was private, intended for a limited circle of friends, and had been shared without her consent. They highlighted the importance of differentiating between genuine defamation and personal opinions expressed in confidential communications. Their closing arguments reinforced the idea that criminalizing such common speech threatened fundamental freedoms. Pride had become the most prominent victim of this law's misuse, transforming her case into a symbol of the need for reform that could safeguard free expression for all Indonesians. In a landmark decision that set a significant precedent, the court's ruling drew attention to the risks faced by individuals speaking out against injustice across various sectors. A growing coalition of supporters gathered, holding signs demanding justice and legal reforms, emphasizing that Indonesia's citizens would not tolerate laws that penalized personal expression. While the protests remained peaceful, their message resonated clearly. The nation's legal framework was at a critical crossroads. It could either uphold true justice or reveal the imbalance of power favoring large corporations over ordinary people. Finally, on December 29, 2009, the court announced its verdict. As the judge read the decision aloud, silence enveloped the courtroom. In a surprising move, the panel of judges acquitted Pra of all charges, citing a lack of concrete evidence that her email had been maliciously defamatory. The court acknowledged that although the hospital might have suffered reputational harm, there was no proof of intentional wrongdoing on Pra's part. Importantly, the ruling also recognized the extensive public support she had received, which underscored the urgent need to reconsider Indonesia's defamation laws. Initially stunned, Pra soon felt tears of relief as she grasped the significance of the moment. She was finally free, without a prison term or criminal record, bringing a long and taxing ordeal to an end. Cheers erupted among her supporters, and she turned to embrace her lawyers, her husband, and the activists who had stood by her throughout. However, her acquittal marked only a victory in the courtroom. The broader fight for legal reform persisted as her case revealed the dangerous vagueness of the existing information technology laws. Legal experts highlighted that many others had been convicted under similar vague provisions, often without the media attention or public backing that had supported PRA. Some of those convicted were journalists, while others were social media users expressing dissatisfaction with government or business services. The question remained, how many more might face similar consequences before meaningful changes occurred? Public pressure on lawmakers intensified in the wake of her case. Calls grew for amendments to the current laws to prevent unjust prosecutions in the future. Activists and civil rights advocates argued that defamation should be handled as a civil matter rather than a criminal offense, reflecting a broader movement toward fairer legal standards. PRA's fundraising campaign, initially intended to gather support, had evolved into a symbol of justice, inspiring efforts for systemic change. Despite her victory, PRA was eager to return to everyday life. In interviews after her acquittal, she expressed profound gratitude for the overwhelming backing she received, yet emphasized her desire for a peaceful life. "I just want to be with my children," she said. "I want to live quietly and move on from this difficult chapter." She acknowledged that her experience had sparked a wider debate about legal fairness in Indonesia, but remained hopeful that the country would continue to evolve toward greater justice and transparency. In many ways, Indonesia's history has been deeply intertwined with individuals challenging injustices and fighting for basic rights. One such story is that of a woman whose personal life was profoundly affected by the demands of activism. Constant public scrutiny, stress, and time away from her family left emotional scars. Despite her initial reluctance to seek the limelight, her perseverance cast her as a symbol of resistance against oppressive laws. Her name became forever linked to the struggle for digital freedom in Indonesia, and her case served as a landmark precedent used to question and reform laws related to defamation. Over the years, legal scholars and policymakers debated necessary amendments to prevent laws from being misapplied or overly broad. For many Indonesians, her story showcased that ordinary citizens could challenge powerful structures and achieve meaningful change. The collective efforts of activists proved that no corporation, law, or government institution was beyond scrutiny when the public demanded accountability. After her acquittal, her life gradually shifted back to normal. She maintained a low profile, focusing on her family and personal well-being, and only occasionally appeared at forums discussing digital rights and legal reforms. Nonetheless, her case remained a powerful symbol, an emblem of the potential for grassroots movements to expand the boundaries of free expression and inspire future change. Although she never sought recognition as a hero, her fight for justice left a lasting legacy, reminding the nation that even the smallest voices can challenge the foundations of authority. In 2009, India faced a pivotal incident, exposing deep-rooted issues within its law enforcement system. The case, often referred to as the Udan encounter, involved the killing of a 22-year-old MBA graduate named Rambir Singh by police officers. This event drew widespread attention to police misconduct and extrajudicial actions, sparking vigorous debate over human rights and accountability. On July 3rd of that year, Rambir had traveled from Gazabad to Dehradun for a job interview, optimistic about his future. Tragically, that day marked the end of his life under circumstances that remained controversial and troubling. Official reports claimed that Rambir was involved in extortion and, upon confrontation, attempted to flee, prompting a police chase. They stated that he had been armed and had fired at officers, prompting a deadly response. However, eyewitness testimonies and forensic evidence began to challenge the official narrative. Witnesses reported seeing Rambir being detained without resistance, and later forensic examinations uncovered that he had been shot multiple times at close range. These discrepancies raised serious questions about the authenticity of the police account and highlighted the urgent need for systemic reforms to ensure justice and accountability within law enforcement agencies. The circumstances of the incident strongly indicated a purposefully staged act rather than a genuine confrontation, challenging the police's initial account of a shootout. Evidence pointing to a deliberately arranged event sparked widespread media coverage and public outrage, calling for justice for Rambur Singh. Human rights advocates condemned what appeared to be an extrajudicial killing, demanding an impartial and thorough inquiry into the police's conduct. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, the National Human Rights Commission emphasized the importance of holding officials accountable and safeguarding citizens' rights against abuse of authority. In response to mounting pressure, the Central Bureau of Investigation was appointed to examine the case. Their investigation resulted in the detention of 17 police officers, marking one of the largest arrests of law enforcement personnel in such a case. These officers faced charges including homicide, abduction, and evidence tampering. As the trial unfolded, it garnered national attention, embodying a vital test for India's judicial system in tackling police misconduct and delivering justice to victims of state excesses. The death of Rambur Singh in this alleged fake encounter underscored a disturbing pattern of extrajudicial killings in the country, often called fake encounters, where officers eliminate individuals without proper legal procedures, falsely claiming self-defense or crime prevention. Such practices are widely criticized for bypassing justice and breaching fundamental rights. The public's reaction reflected a broad intolerance for abuse of power, with civil society groups and the media uniting to call for structural reforms to prevent similar incidents. This case revealed the urgent need to establish effective accountability measures within police institutions. Suggestions included creating independent oversight bodies, deploying body cameras, and setting strict protocols on the use of force. As legal proceedings unfolded, the nation anticipated the judgment, understanding that its outcome would impact the principles of justice, rule of law, and human rights in India. The Rambur Singh case aimed not only to seek justice, but also to set a precedent against police impunity, reinforcing democratic values. In summary, the tragic demise of Rambur Singh in 2009 highlighted severe issues of police misconduct and the imperative for comprehensive reform in India's law enforcement agencies. Beyond seeking justice, the case served as a catalyst for national reflection on accountability, rights protection, and the relationship between the state and its citizens. The investigation quickly drew widespread attention, driven by the brutal manner of the incident and the pressing need for systemic change. The killing of Rambur Singh not only marked a tragic loss, but also sparked broader concerns about law enforcement practices across India. As the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, began its investigation, unsettling details surfaced that cast doubt on the official account provided by local police. Inconsistencies between police reports, forensic evidence, and eyewitness accounts painted a troubling picture, what appeared to be a targeted execution rather than a legitimate encounter. Police claimed that Rambur, a member of a gang involved in extortion, had opened fire on officers when confronted, prompting a defensive response. However, multiple witnesses testified seeing Rambur alive and in police custody hours before his body was discovered. Surveillance footage from a nearby location contradicted this timeline, showing him being taken away in a police vehicle following his apprehension. Such contradictions cast serious doubt on the police's version of events, suggesting that Rambur had been killed in cold blood rather than during an actual exchange of gunfire. The autopsy report further undermined the police narrative. Forensic analysis revealed that Rambur had been shot multiple times at close range, with entry wounds on his back and signs of physical assault on his body. The trajectory of the bullets indicated that he had been restrained or immobilized at the time of shooting. Bruises and deep cuts on his wrists pointed to his having been handcuffed before the alleged encounter. These findings confirmed fears held by human rights advocates and the victim's family, that the death was the result of a staged operation. As these revelations emerged, public outrage intensified across India. The death of a young MBA graduate with no criminal background galvanized protests in Delhi and other major cities, where students, activists, and ordinary citizens demanded justice. The victim's family, devastated and seeking clarity, accused the police of fabricating charges against Rambur to justify the enforced killing. They insisted on an impartial investigation, ultimately leading to the CBI assuming responsibility for the case. The CBI's findings were dire and detailed. Their investigation identified that at least 17 police officers had directly participated in Ramber's illegal detention, mistreatment, and eventual execution. Evidence from phone records, eyewitness testimonies, and forensic tests confirmed that Ramber had been alive hours after the police claimed he had been shot. Furthermore, investigators uncovered deliberate attempts by officers to manipulate the crime scene, tampering with evidence and planting weapons to support a narrative of a gunfight. It became increasingly apparent that this incident was not isolated. Over recent years, India had witnessed a disturbing pattern of so-called fake encounters, where law enforcement officials used extrajudicial killings as a means to eliminate individuals suspected of crimes. These staged operations often masked attempts to dodge due process, raising profound questions about justice and accountability within the justice system. During a recent high-profile case, authorities claimed that their actions were justified by the need to uphold law and order, despite bypassing formal judicial procedures. Critics, however, argued that such encounters eroded the rule of law and fostered unchecked police violence. The incident intensified demands for reform, with human rights organizations, legal experts, and civil society advocating for greater oversight of law enforcement agencies. They called for independent bodies to scrutinize cases of extrajudicial killings, the mandatory use of body cameras by officers, and stronger mechanisms to hold law enforcement accountable. Although the Supreme Court of India had previously issued guidelines aimed at preventing fabricated encounters, it became evident that these measures were either disregarded or poorly enforced, as the case revealed. Unlike many past situations where officers escaped punishment due to political ties or lack of concrete evidence, the investigation conducted by the Central Bureau of Investigation made significant progress this time. Solid forensic evidence, witness testimonies, and police records exposed contradictions in official reports, reinforcing the pursuit of justice. The defense tried to justify the officers' actions by suggesting that the victim was involved in criminal activities and that the police acted in self-defense, despite the overwhelming evidence against them. Throughout the legal process, the media played a pivotal role in maintaining public focus on the case. Interviews with legal specialists, human rights defenders, and the victim's grieving family kept the issue front and center. The father of the victim, who tirelessly advocated for justice, became a prominent figure in the movement against police excesses, participating in press conferences and urging the government to take decisive action against misconduct. Public opinion strongly favored accountability, with vigils held across major cities, student-led marches, and social media campaigns condemning police impunity. The case embodied the broader struggle against systemic corruption and abuse of authority by those entrusted to protect citizens. As the trial unfolded, evidence emerged that highlighted not only the wrongful killing of an innocent individual, but also an orchestrated cover-up. Key proof was provided by ballistic reports confirming that the victim's hands lacked gunpowder residue, indicating he had not discharged a firearm, directly contradicting police claims. Phone records further implicated the officers, revealing their presence at undisclosed locations during the incident, suggesting they had staged the encounter away from public scrutiny. The prosecution pressed for the maximum penalty, emphasizing the officers' betrayal of public trust and the gravity of the crime they committed. This case underscored the importance of accountability and reinforced the ongoing demand for reforms within law enforcement to ensure such violations are no longer tolerated. The case represented a pivotal challenge for India's judiciary, as the verdict could send a clear message about accountability within law enforcement. If the officers were acquitted without consequence, it would imply that police might continue operating with unchecked immunity despite overwhelming evidence against them. The accused officers maintained their innocence, contending they had merely followed orders and that the encounter was a lawful act of policing. However, as the investigation progressed, the prosecution systematically dismantled these claims, demonstrating that Ramber had been unlawfully detained, subjected to torture, and executed in cold blood. Nearing its conclusion, the trial captivated the nation, transforming from a single act of violence into a broader debate about the integrity of policing in India. The question remained, Would justice prevail, or would the powerful once again evade responsibility? The outcome would reveal whether the country was prepared to confront systemic flaws or allow extrajudicial actions to persist unchallenged. The courtroom was packed as the final arguments unfolded, with journalists, legal experts, human rights advocates, and ordinary citizens eagerly awaiting the ruling in one of the most scrutinized criminal cases in recent years. Facing the front row, Rambur Singh's family endured the ordeal, a portrait of hope mixed with exhaustion, while the accused officers sat stoic, awaiting their fate. This was more than a murder case. It was a test of society's willingness to hold law enforcement accountable in a nation where such abuses had long been a hidden truth. Over the past weeks, prosecutors meticulously debunked the defense's assertions. Forensic evidence confirmed Rambur was restrained with handcuffs and was immobilized at the time of his death, with ballistic analysis indicating he had been shot at close range in an execution-style manner. Witnesses testified to having seen police take Rambur into custody alive, contradicting officers' claims of a shootout, and call records placed multiple officers at a secluded site during the incident, suggesting a staged encounter. The defense's attempt to justify the killing by pointing to Rambur's criminal past failed to hold up, as no credible evidence emerged to support claims of self-defense. Ballistic tests further confirmed Rambur had not used a firearm. Their last strategy rested on procedural loopholes and political influence, tactics that had often worked in similar cases in the past. Yet, the intense public scrutiny this time left little room for behind-the-scenes deals or compromises. Given the gravity of the evidence, the judge took their time, weighing each detail thoroughly before rendering a decision, signifying the importance of the moment for justice and accountability. Before delivering his verdict, the courtroom was silent with anticipation as the judge began his reading. 17 police officers were convicted of serious charges, including murder, kidnapping, and destruction of evidence. This ruling marked a historic moment, as such a large group of law enforcement personnel had rarely been found guilty of unlawful killings in India. The court recognized that the encounter had been fabricated, that Rambur Singh was an innocent man falsely implicated, and that his execution represented a severe violation of human rights. As the sentences were announced, emotions flared in the courtroom. Rambur's father broke down, overwhelmed by years of relentless struggle, culminating in this hard-won justice. Supporters of police reform celebrated the decision, viewing it as a pivotal step toward accountability. The convicted officers, many of whom believed themselves untouchable, remained motionless, aware that their freedom was now at stake and that they could face years of imprisonment. The verdict resonated nationwide, prompting widespread reactions. Legal experts called it a watershed moment that would set a precedent for future cases of law enforcement misconduct. Human rights groups applauded the judiciary for challenging a long-standing climate of impunity within the police force. The media scrutinized every detail, from flawed police procedures to the broader implications of the ruling, while public opinion largely supported the conviction, hopeful that it would discourage similar wrongful encounters. However, not everyone. Despite this legal victory, the battle was far from finished, as many other families who had suffered similar injustices continued to seek justice and reform. Family members of others facing similar circumstances began to step forward, driven by hope that the momentum created by this case could lead to justice for their own losses. Investigations were reopened, legal petitions filed, and discussions about police accountability gained fresh urgency. The Dune encounter case served as a harsh reminder of the dangers posed by unchecked authority, revealing the troubling reality where staged confrontations had become a routine, albeit illicit method to suppress crime. Yet, the case also exemplified the resilience of truth and the power of persistent pursuit of justice, demonstrating that even entrenched systemic corruption could be challenged. Over the years, it continued to be referenced in legal arguments and human rights reports, becoming a benchmark in court decisions and a warning to law enforcement officers who believed they could act with immunity. Although such extrajudicial incidents had not been entirely eradicated, the conviction of 17 officers sent a potent message. No individual, regardless of their position, was above the law. For Rambur Singh's family, the outcome was bittersweet, While their son's life was irrevocably lost to those sworn to serve and protect, his death ignited a movement. This movement aimed to transform India into a nation where justice is not a privilege reserved for a few, but a fundamental right for all.